In the shadows, a lone man struggled relentlessly as he battled hordes of the undead. No matter what actions he took, they continued to come. He understands that he is in the underworld and feels confident that his body is strong enough to withstand its challenges. He understands that he is in the underworld and feels confident that his body is strong enough to withstand its challenges. To him, the idea of constant fighting seemed completely unreasonable. He loudly declares himself the ruler of all humans. He stood as the champion of his community, regarded as nearly saintly when measured against the rest. Without warning, a massive crimson figure materialized. The man raised his voice, summoning the ruler of the underworld. He wondered aloud why anyone would be interested in someone like him. The mighty entity left the king feeling let down, and the ruler, filled with outrage, questioned how anyone could have the audacity to treat someone of his stature with such disrespect. The master of the underworld completes inhaling smoke from his pipe. She insulted the man by calling him a fool and questioned whether he had finally lost his mind altogether. He possessed complete knowledge of the other man and understood the sense of strength that had always defined his life. He was known as the boy capable of taking anything he desired and as the monk whose hands brought death. The king guided his followers as they marched into war. Despite everything, when faced with a Mao, he is regarded as nothing more than a useless wrongdoer. He was nothing more than a man sent to battle, someone who destroyed homes for his own amusement and carried the weight of his sins. There was someone who had taken a child's life, severing her head, all because she would not agree to battle. He truly was a king, yet the path to his crown had been paved with countless lives lost at his hands. He needed to stay silent, coming to terms with the fact that this torment would last forever. It became clear that someone else held authority in this place, not him. He would find freedom only when every soul he had wronged felt that his pain matched their loss. Until that moment arrives, he is destined to endure endless suffering, repeatedly being broken over and over. The man lets out a desperate scream, his thoughts clouded by the terrifying realization of what is about to happen to him. Later, one of the officials serving the king of the underworld, Noming, found himself genuinely astonished. Amazed by the king's remarkable show of strength and performance, the observer thought that repeating the same act for 300 years would eventually make it less impressive. Despite having a successor named, No Ming couldn't help but feel a tinge of sadness as he made the unexpected decision to retire, still aware that had a few shortcomings. The king feels confident about his own performance, believing he is managing well for someone in his position. However, Noni points out that, in reality, numerous people in the kingdom are facing hardships as a result of the king's actions. The king considers it only fitting, believing that those who have sinned must face harsh trials in that place to atone for their wrongdoings. After a while, the group reached the palace of the underworld, where Noman noted that the only task remaining was to start the process of judging souls for reincarnation. The king, though somewhat anxious, expresses his gratitude to Naming for all the support and assistance he has provided throughout the years. He would remember him, even after being reborn into a new life. Acknowledges that it is good he has kept his promise, but as the king opens the doors, the chatty gnome stared in surprise upon spotting a vibrant, flourishing plant. A lush green forest stretched out in front of him. Naming observed that, in the past, the river surrounding the area would have run red with blood, yet now it carried nothing but clear water and shining crystals. In place of anguished cries, the air filled with the gentle melodies of birdsong. The entire area had been transformed to resemble a holiday destination. Naming's anger boiled over when he saw what was happening, feeling betrayed because was meant to take responsibility. The fool was missing, leaving no trace behind. The cauldron, once meant to be brimming with scalding tar and the suffering of tormented souls, now looked as though it could serve nothing more sinister than a simple pot of soup. Rainwater pooled everywhere, and the search for that elusive person continued. No Ming informed King that he ought to return, insisting that this place was definitely not intended for someone like him. Yammer's determination to be reborn overwhelms any other desire, leading him to reject the offer without hesitation. Naming's frustration flared as brought up the idea of reincarnation at such a moment, yet was convinced that this was a fate he had earned. He had devoted years of relentless effort, yet without the presence of that loathed person, he found himself unable to begin his next chapter. Without warning, his eyesight grows hazy while Naming attempts to speak to him, sending his whole world spiraling into disorder. At that moment, Naming jolted him back to reality, urgently calling out for him to get out of the way. Despite efforts, the sacred blow slammed into him, and the presence of God appeared before him with a request. He asks him to look for. Yama shook his head, placing the blame on for having ignored them for so long. He questioned why he should bother to go when his duties had already ended. God uttered words that could not quite hear, yet the authoritative manner in which they were delivered unsettled him. Now, found himself unable to be reincarnated, his complete lack of skill in all things holding him back. He was no longer counted among the servants, having stepped down from his duties and retired. The man might have become so forgetful with age that he no longer remembers, so she hoped he would politely move out of the way. Summoning all his remaining strength, succeeds in shoving God backward. He gradually shut the portal he had formed and went back to where he belonged. Just as the portal was about to shut, suddenly appeared beside it, using her powers to pry it back open. He decided to stay because he wished to be reborn, so he set out to look for, silently promising himself that he would eventually make amends for this. At that moment, he steps through the gate and suddenly finds himself soaring high above the city. As he collapsed onto the ground, he became aware that flames surrounded him on all sides. As several individuals began to rush in his direction, he caught sight of another figure appearing through the blaze. The unfortunate souls belonged in the realm of the dead, not wandering among the living. One member of the group successfully seizes hold of a young girl. She gets ready to devour her. Reacts immediately, charging forward and forcefully tossing him a great distance. Blood seemed to fill the air with its scent, surrounding him no matter where he went. Every lifeless eye focused on him, while he questioned whether they had all lost their sanity. The speaker wondered if the underworld had failed to satisfy the limited intellects of those in question. At this moment, they have done something before him that cannot be forgiven. After a person passes away, they transform into entities known as the deceased. The judges then send these souls to hell, where they must atone for the wrongdoings they committed while alive, facing punishment in the 8 different hells. Those who express remorse only after facing consequences for their actions. They find themselves born again, starting life anew. According to the laws that govern the deceased, such actions were forbidden, yet found it unimaginable that anyone would be bold enough to ascend to the world above. As had anticipated, it was unlikely that the dead could hear him ahead of time. He intended to follow in the footsteps of those who came before, determined to bring about their final defeat and cast them into oblivion once more. He continues his actions repeatedly until a minor agreement is reached. The departed individual manifests in front of him, becomes overwhelmed with anger. He relentlessly drove the lifeless person's face into the earth over and over again. A thick cloud of dust began to swirl upward. Even the rest of the deceased froze, taken aback by surprise. Yammer wondered aloud whether the attacks would finally come to an end. It seemed as though violence was the only language they could comprehend. Without warning, a piercing object emerged from within the swarm of the undead. The creature soared in its direction, but swiftly avoided the attack with quick reflexes. Naming wondered about its well-being, but its attention had already shifted to whoever he would face next. As the deceased shifted aside to clear a path, he moved forward. He steps out of the flames, clutching a severed human head and wearing a sinister smile. Yammer notices an unusual quality in this particular individual. His presence stands out from the rest, marked by a heavy metallic scent of blood that lingers in the air around him. The moment he spotted his next target, the newly departed abandoned his previous plaything and moved eagerly to seize a fresh prize. Nobody among them dared to question whether ending the life of this disrespectful individual was the right choice. Had already reached a decision, catching the narrator off guard. The undead creature launched his weapon once more, aiming it at the gnome. Questions himself about the reasons behind the countless humans he has taken the lives of. It seemed possible that he was drawing upon their life force, seeking a chance to be reborn. Despite everything, he lifts his weapon once more and hurls it forward again. Yammer observes that such an occurrence ought to be impossible. Reincarnating without first facing judgment was regarded as a forbidden act in the underworld. Despite understanding this, his soul successor nevertheless permitted every one of them to wander unrestrained. Yammer makes up his mind to help by setting fire to every wrongdoer he comes across. Fueled by intense bloodlust, he attacks the lifeless body without hesitation. Repeatedly, the action occurred over and over. The creature is suddenly hurled toward a building standing close by. Approached with a casual stride, tilting his head to one side as his neck let out a sharp crack. He presses his foot firmly down on the head of the wrongdoer. He insisted on finding out the reason behind the countless lives, taken just for the chance to be reborn. He needed to come up with a convincing explanation. Yammer repeatedly questions him while delivering a swift kick to his head. The fallen individual unexpectedly takes advantage of the moment, emerging from the debris to launch a sudden assault. Yammer wonders if there is an explanation for all the deaths, believing he is much too powerless for such violence to happen without cause. The person was said to draw in an incredible amount of energy. He began to wonder if he had given the other person too much credit. The deceased bent down, grabbed a stone and rushed toward who couldn't believe how foolish the attempt seemed. At that moment, more of the dead began to emerge from beneath the ground. They moved to restrain him, pressing him firmly against the ground. The other person broke into a wide grin. He forcefully struck's head over and over again. Throughout the entire time, he couldn't stop cackling wildly, his laughter echoing with a hint of madness. Without warning, swung his weapon in one swift motion, severing the man's hand, and then demanded an answer. The laughter suddenly faded, leaving a tense silence as the final taunt lingered in the air, questioning whether the amusement had truly vanished. Released the full force of hell's wrath onto the wrongdoer. As the assault raged on, the searing heat consumed the entire area, causing their skin to blister and burn. Yammer scaled the side of a building and paused at the top, glancing over his shoulder. The moon shone with a crimson hue, matching the intensity of his own color. He wonders aloud whether the departed will finally choose to follow his command. Every one of them flushed bright red, and bent low in deference to their rightful sovereign. However, had not yet completed his task, he believed the proper punishment for them was still to come. He would begin by announcing the wrongdoings they had committed. The wrongs of running away, causing disorder and bringing harm to people were. Each of these offenses was considered highly serious, so the judge would assign a fittingly severe punishment. For 7 centuries, chaos ruled. 2 millennia were spent seeking freedom. Anyone who brought harm to humans faced a punishment of 10,000 years more. Once the sentence was delivered, he summoned a portal that would transport them to the location where they would fulfill their punishments. They found themselves puzzled by the sight of the vibrant, green landscape, unable to reconcile its beauty with the negative things they'd heard. Yammer urgently instructs him to go indoors immediately. He paid no attention to its beauty or any similar details. After kicking them through, he makes an announcement. They plan to make the area more humid, which involved carefully removing all the green plants by hand. As the portal sealed shut, one of the fallen reached out, attempting to speak. Quickly closed the door, leaving it shut right in front of him. Nobody pauses to consider what the dead man might have wanted to express, and Yama simply assumes that he was likely trying to promise he would put in more effort from now on. Naming reveals that several of the deceased had already begun to escape beforehand. Wondered if he should go after them as well. He questioned why he was only receiving this information at that moment, though he decided not to dwell on it. His thoughts quickly shifted as he tried to figure out where the others had disappeared to. No mention that they had attended a place referred to as a school. Within the school building, a woman and several students searched desperately for a way out. However, the corridors are crowded with lifeless bodies. Li Wu, a gravedigger by trade, informed the group that they needed to search for a different route. A boy silently questioned whether their lives were in danger, while a privileged girl interrupted his thoughts, sharply reminding everyone that's job was to deal with graves. The observer wondered why the current hunter of the dead appeared so powerless. In the past, she had encountered other gravediggers who possessed extraordinary abilities, but this individual seemed completely ordinary. Clarified that she had not yet discovered a corpse to provide her with its ceremonial robes, yet she assured them of her intent to keep them safe. There was no reason for concern, but the meaningless conversation attracted the attention of a few restless spirits, who noticed them standing on the staircase. Instructed the children to head upstairs, assuring them she would deal with the lone corpse herself. The force nudges her backwards slightly, yet when a different student arrives and pulls the door open, she pushes the body aside with a forceful kick and informs the others. She intended to continue onward, confident that she would rejoin the group as soon as she finished her task. Despite her foolishness, the pampered girl soon found herself seized by the hands of a lifeless body. A creature struggles to ascend the stairs, its movements sluggish and desperate, as it readies itself to feast on living flesh. Before the creature has a chance to attack her and rid the world of her foolishness, leaps forward, placing herself between the danger and its target, and ends up receiving the bite herself. The intense pain surges through her, yet it gives her the strength she needs to shove the lifeless body aside with a forceful kick. He checks on the girl to see if she is okay. The girl forcefully pushes the other's hand away, making it clear she doesn't want to be touched. With anger in her voice, she accuses the other person of nearly causing her death. The others questioned whether she truly deserved to be called a gravedigger. Experiences a flicker of annoyance, yet relief washes over her knowing the girl remains safe. She hurried over to the door, quickly shutting it before turning the lock. The relentless pounding and shoving of the corpses against the barrier made one student worry that the barricade would eventually give way. Despite everything, the character could only trust that the creator of the door truly understood their craft. She raised her arm and launched a bright flare skyward. She announces to the group that her boss is on the way, assuring them that all that remains is to wait patiently. A classmate became upset with her, questioning how she could laugh at a time like this. They worked tirelessly to find a solution, knowing that if these people perished, the whole country would face ruin. Feels a wave of astonishment at the foolishness of the statement just uttered. The girl went on to say that her only real skill might be digging graves, since she didn't feel even the slightest bit helpful. She had come close to losing her life due to Wu's reckless actions. Knowing her father's immense wealth, she realized he would be furious to learn about her injuries. Without warning, arrived on the scene, silently noting how these privileged kids seem to have no shortage of bold words. The bothersome girl demands to know by what right he judges her, and questions how he managed to appear in that place. Attempts to assert his dominance by claiming the title of King of the Underworld. Each attempt he made to speak was interrupted by a sudden crash of thunder, silencing him before he could finish. He is convinced that these events are caused by a higher power, while the girl suspects he has simply lost his mind. A student struck on the chest, angrily questioning his audacity in treating with such disrespect and challenging whether he even understood who she was. Revealed his arrival was driven by a relentless chase of the dead, and the overwhelming odor of human blood hung heavily in the air, confirming his words. They had also caught the sounds from beneath, which led him to leap up to this spot without hesitation. The other students burst into laughter at the idea of him chasing corpses, finding it completely ridiculous. Despite his ragged appearance that makes him look like a beggar, he still believes he has the ability to fight. No regarded the situation as ridiculous and turned to, wondering aloud if he ought to eliminate the group. However, dismissed the idea, pointing out that their targets were merely kids. It was better for them to remain undisturbed. Ultimately, their misguided upbringing could be traced back to the choices of their parents. When those parents eventually passed away and found themselves in hell, he would ensure they faced the consequences they rightfully earned. The student, clearly irritated by the blatant provocation, demands to know how someone so disrespectful could have the nerve to insult strangers. Wu attempts to intervene by positioning herself between the two, urging them to stop arguing. However, the student harshly dismisses her, demanding that she stay out of their business and move aside. She had no part in this fight. Despite her determination to get involved, he pushed her away with a sharp slap. In that moment, noticed the bite mark left on her by a corpse. A sense of doubt crept over him as he questioned whether she would truly be able to hold on until rescue came. He senses a strange familiarity in her appearance, as though he has seen her before. His train of thought came to an abrupt halt when the annoyed student, clearly frustrated by the distraction, decided to prove just how intimidating he could be. Should his father ever descend into the underworld, even the ruler of that dark realm would be reduced to tears, pleading endlessly for mercy and offering constant apologies. When he learns that holds the title of king of the underworld, he cannot contain his amusement and breaks into laughter. He struggles to suppress his laughter, but the situation strikes him as so funny that he simply cannot contain it. The student wondered what was so amusing to make the other boy laugh so much, questioning whether he thought he was being funny, but ultimately decided not to care. None of it mattered anymore. He was determined to defeat his opponent and then leave the rest for his father to deal with, just as he always had. No attempted to caution him to halt his actions, but his warning went unheeded. When the assault finally arrived, the student's hand was left searing with pain as it concluded. The Jade Emperor, who was regarded as God, attempted to bring the chaos under control. Noming insists that there is no turning back now, since everything has already spiraled beyond control. Quickly moves to shield from the oncoming danger, urging him to move out of the way rather than remaining motionless. Despite blood trickling from her mouth as she coughed due to her injuries, she insisted on keeping him at a distance, determined to shield him regardless of the risk to herself. The student finally reached his limit, feeling as though he was being painted as the bad guy. Still, he thought that if she continued to overstep, he would make sure she understood exactly where she stood. Every time spotted someone guilty of wrongdoing, his eyes grew large and the powerful urges of the underworld's ruler surged within him. The student insisted on having his hand freed, complaining about the pain, and threatened serious consequences if his demand was ignored. Yammer points out that taking a life is much more difficult than imagined, causing the student to feel afraid and catching Wu off guard. He squeezed the student's hand relentlessly, not stopping until the skin flushed a deep purple. When he finally released his grip, the student felt a sudden rush of confidence. He announced his indifference, vowing to end the other man's life. He intended to reveal all the details to his father before discarding the body among the dead. Nobody dared to go near him because of how dirty he was. Yammer couldn't believe the boy remained so stubborn, persisting in making threats against others without any justification. At this moment, Yammer had no reason to address him, as he was now just like the ones who had already passed away. Since the dawn of time, violence has been the only language that reaches them, serving as a weapon wielded against wrongdoers. He reached for a piece of wood, brushing off the dust. As he did so, he declared his intention to give it a name. He tries to recall if the object sparks any memories for him as he examines it. The student felt confused by the topic being discussed. His friend remarked that it resembled the wand from Harry Potter. Yomer nods in agreement, assuring everyone that it is indeed true. Without hesitation, the teacher brought the object down sharply onto the student's backside. At this point, the student was expected to completely grasp what was happening. Due to what he had done, his punishment was to be struck using Harry Potter's wand. Yomer relentlessly struck him with a wooden plank, causing the students nearby to cry out in agony. Naming could hardly believe what his master had done. Like the others present, they stared in astonishment, unable to believe what was unfolding before their eyes. Yammer behaves wildly during the act, making the situation even worse. After completing the punishment, the teacher looked at the student's now bright red backside and wondered aloud if this would be enough to encourage better behavior in the future. He knew he needed to start thinking carefully from now on, or else would come back and use the Harry Potter book to teach him another lesson. Without warning, the pampered girl began to shriek as she noticed the dead scaling the building, piling themselves up layer by layer. She silently considers their options yet steps forward to shield her. Everyone needed to head downstairs, hoping to create a distraction just long enough for a getaway. The girl shakes her head and firmly argues that countless bodies lie beneath them, making it impossible for her to agree. Looked around and realized that every one of the dead had appeared, steadily making their way upward. Understanding the danger, knew they had to escape immediately before it was too late. Following that decision, the group began preparing for the walk. Instructed to join them, assuring everyone that she would handle the responsibilities left behind. He reflects on his experiences, realizing that although he has encountered countless individuals throughout his life, none have ever resembled her. Despite having faced insults, neglect, and even harm, she chose to help those very people instead of prioritizing her own safety. None of these miserable people would ever experience true kindness, yet she still put her own life on the line to shield them from harm. Delivered a swift chop to the boy's head, remarking that, for someone his age, he certainly had a tendency to speak in confusing riddles. It would be safer if he stopped speaking and made his way down as well, because remaining there any longer had become much too risky for him. Notices just how impossible it is to anticipate her actions. Although she had arrived, her presence ensured that her death would carry purpose. As he attempts to release his special move, the Jade Emperor intervenes, instructing him to stay out of the matter. He realized that he needed to search for, it seemed obvious to him. Palmer wondered aloud how such words could be spoken in a moment like this, but the Jade Emperor responded with indifference, making it clear that her fate was of no concern to him. He knew he shouldn't get involved. At that instant, the student hurried behind the door and closed it, while the injured boy cried out loudly. It seemed certain that would be devoured without mercy. He realized too late that laughing in the man's presence was a grave mistake. Now he faced death alongside the woman deemed worthless. Reaching the limit of their patience, instructed Naming to handle the situation. No one willingly welcomed the burden placed upon them. A corpse suddenly sprang toward, its movements quick and aggressive. June reacted quickly, stepping forward to protect him before anyone else could. Despite being bitten repeatedly, she persevered. He found himself puzzled, unable to understand the reasons behind her actions. Responds by posing her own question, wondering aloud if anyone truly needs a reason to protect others. Yammer had not anticipated that response, and the words touched him profoundly. Despite having no idea where to look, the Jade Emperor continued to demand that he pursue. All around, the restless dead surged through the streets, claiming the lives of helpless bystanders like the woman who now lay motionless. Despite everything, the Gears continued their relentless effort to halt his progress. Realizes that everything happening is intended to support the laws of God, which she believes are generally just. Due to his carelessness, countless people were now enduring pain, and he refused to remain passive as blameless individuals continued to be harmed. He destroyed every trace of sin and rescued the woman from danger. With one powerful blow, he eliminated all the undead, then turned to and explained that he had an opportunity for her. As expected, the Jade Emperor made an attempt to intervene, yet Yama ignored him once more and continued on. Was informed that her pay would be very generous and that she would receive comprehensive insurance coverage. She would have the freedom to travel whenever she pleased, and after retirement, she could begin a new life as the privileged child of an influential family. He is essentially offering her a position to act on behalf of God. As Jewel slipped into unconsciousness, she quietly remarked to herself that the position sounded like an excellent opportunity. Astonished by the girl's remaining strength, gently lowers her to the ground and checks to see if she is okay. Glanced down at her injury, noticing the heavy flow of blood, and understanding that she had already run out of time. They might cross paths once more in another lifetime. Felt responsible for her safety after inviting her, determined not to let any harm come to her. He considered that removing his hair might be the solution. The band harnessed the power of the underworld, drawing her away and transporting her into a calm, white realm. He observed that she was the only one to arrive in this place without any injuries, yet he still greeted her warmly and introduced her to the very first underworld he had crafted himself. stunned by the situation, asks him to say it again because she cannot believe she is actually in the underworld. However, as they continued to wander, the sensation seemed genuine rather than simply a product of their imagination. Her injuries had almost completely mended, and she viewed this as a chance to act. She requested to be formally employed, and realizing she still didn't know it, inquired about's name. Yomer casually downplays the situation, mentioning that it's merely the ruler of the whole underworld. Even though she referred to him as a spark of curiosity about him had begun to flicker within her. Could hardly believe his eyes as he found himself face to face with the ruler of the underworld, an encounter so rare it felt almost unreal. Interrupted her thoughts with a question about her name, and she responded. Wore her hairband around her arm, feeling as if she had transformed into one of the gods. She would never experience aging, never witness the birth of her, nor share her final moments with loved ones. Instead, her existence would stretch on endlessly. Wu admired the hairband for its attractive appearance and wondered aloud about its purpose. Feels the urge to reply, yet a sudden transformation in the sky to a deep red interrupts her. He notices that someone is on their way, prompting him to think they should leave right away. Informed that the object in her hands represented a looming danger shaped by destiny. She needed to carry it everywhere because without it, surviving in this place would be impossible for her. She wonders aloud whether not possessing it would mean being apart from the others, and Yammer replies that, in a sense, it would. There was a strong chance that someone would swiftly execute her, leaving her with no time to react. In time, she regains consciousness and finds herself once more in the real world. A co-worker by the name of Minyu is urgently attempting to rouse her from sleep. A wave of relief washes over him as she slowly regains consciousness, her eyes fluttering open after remaining motionless for so long. Minyu continues his conversation, unaware that is lost in thought, questioning whether the recent events actually occurred or if they were just imagined. As she rose to her feet, confusion crossed her face as she wondered aloud how she had ended up in that place. Minyu quickly clarified the situation by telling her that they had responded to an emergency signal she had sent out. Because of this, there have been no casualties so far. At the moment, she observes people handling the bodies found in the area. Wondered about the safety of the students she had been shielding, and Minyu reassured her that everyone was unharmed, having taken cover together in a nearby classroom. However, an odd quality set them apart. He couldn't quite find the words to describe it, yet it appeared that some of them were coated in a tacky film, almost as though a huge tongue had swept over their skin. She felt a wave of surprise at the unexpected news, while Minyu acknowledged that the situation did indeed seem unusual. As he went on talking, lowered her gaze, her thoughts drifting to, aware that the danger of destiny still lingered at her fingertips. This meant her experience had been real, not just a dream, as she pondered how she should treat someone. Someone in the park walked over to her and checked to see if she was okay. Assures her that she is doing fine and expresses gratitude for her concern, though she admits that some aspects of the story remain unresolved. He demanded that she be quiet, accusing her of showing concern solely because of her special ability. Despite everything that had occurred, she knew she absolutely needed to arrive at work on time the next day. As she had done so many times before, bowed her head in quiet submission. Minyu arrived and gently tapped her shoulder, reassuring her with a light touch that Park's remarks were nothing to worry about. She was genuinely concerned, and her anxiety drove her to rush over the moment she learned that Wu could be in trouble. Assumed that their actions were driven solely by professional responsibilities, while Minyu remained unconvinced, quietly questioning that explanation. Was guided to a waiting taxi, while Minyu offered her warm wishes for a restful night. Inside the car, his mind drifts to memories of the children whose lives she had managed to protect. Relief washed over them, knowing their friends were unharmed, yet an uneasy feeling lingered as they considered the looming danger of destiny. Its warning echoed in their mind, reminding them that if they faltered now, everything would be lost. As she puzzled over its nature, Naming abruptly materialized at her side, remarking that she was now linked directly to the underworld. Her scream echoed with such intensity that the car lurched, prompting the driver to glance over with concern and inquire about her well-being. Hurriedly made an excuse, claiming she had just spotted a bug, but then leaned in close to quietly inquire about the identity of the strange little ball. Naming identified himself too as her advisor, prompting to question whether anyone else was able to see him. Explained that ordinary people were unable to do it, but when attempted to address him with respectful titles, protested, finding it unbearably awkward. They decided to drop the formalities and talk in a more relaxed manner. After agreeing on this, she inquired about his whereabouts and informed her that he was with the group of students she had referred to earlier. Despite that, had he gone himself, it was likely those scoundrels would have already met their end. Jewel recalls the wild way Yomer acted while disciplining the student. She instructed the driver to take a different path, promising to pay twice the normal fare if he picked up the pace. Inside an unnecessarily massive building, silently calculated how long it might take him to destroy the entire structure. This rule made it harder for the wrongdoers to get away, which wasn't such a terrible thing after all. He notices a man walking through the automatic door and finds the man's actions particularly intriguing. As he moved closer, the man attempted to signal that a transparent barrier was directly in his path. Applied enough pressure that the glass first splintered, then broke apart completely, creating an opening for him to step inside the building. The rest of the group stared in disbelief, unable to comprehend how anyone could have shattered the nation's finest glass. Recognized the reason behind their fear, yet his sole request was for them to surrender those who had committed wrongdoings. As soon as he appeared, people instinctively ran away from him. A mysterious woman remains completely unaffected when he appears. She actually appeared rather delighted by his enthusiasm. The character wondered if this man could really be the ruler of the underworld. At that moment, his attention shifts to her, and he quietly observes her actions. His eyes meet hers only briefly before he vanishes in an instant, reappearing by her side. Without attracting attention, he started to watch her, his face showing clear confusion. She had learned that he ruled over the underworld, yet she couldn't understand why his gaze was fixed on her with such intensity. She wondered aloud if something was wrong, prompting to gesture toward her and demand to know her identity. The woman let out a laugh, noting with amusement that his demeanor remained exactly as it always had. She continued to struggle with recognizing faces, which meant she always had to state her name when meeting someone. Her name was, and she once called the underworld her home. Without warning, her attempt to say hello is cut short when that foolish boy's voice breaks in, nervously questioning a group of uneasy men about whether they had delivered what he requested. They agreed, though they insisted it was unwise. Despite their concerns, the boy dismissed their warnings and demanded that they follow his instructions without question. Felt a rush of happiness at how effortlessly she had managed to find him. He himself to spring ahead but intervened, halting his movement. She implores him to hear her out before making the choice to destroy everything. She wondered if punishing him at this moment was truly necessary. Insists on its significance, despite her lack of understanding. In this world, judges and police officers sometimes choose to ignore the wrongdoing committed by others. He is well aware that many people are driven by greed and corruption, and suspects they might dismiss certain issues as trivial, yet he refuses to overlook such things. As ruler of the underworld, he carried the constant responsibility of bringing judgment to those who had sinned. Countless individuals had endured hardship due to the actions of this boy, so was determined to ensure that his penalty matched the severity of his misdeeds. Stunned by what he had just heard, loosened his grip and released him. Appeared out of nowhere, materializing right before the student, who stood frozen in shock at the sight of him alive. Ever since he abandoned him on a rooftop crowded with corpses, resentment had lingered between them. Yama recalls that he had previously cautioned the boy about the futility of his efforts. Observing the boy's lack of remorse, Yama concludes that the boy is destined to be defeated by Perry once more. Questioned in her mind whether she had understood what was just said. The boy quickly falls to his knees, pleading desperately for the man to reconsider his actions. The staff successfully contacted the guards, who oddly had not been stationed at the entrance, and directed them to confront. just as everyone is on the verge of being cast directly back into the depths of hell. Calmly lifts her hand, signaling for the others to stop bothering him. He posed no threat, prompting the guards to withdraw without hesitation. Felt a sense of astonishment at how much power this woman commanded in that environment. Everyone assumed she possessed strong leadership qualities, yet her true identity remained a mystery. Seizing an opportunity to escape, the student, called Yon Master, makes a swift getaway, leaving visibly annoyed. One of the young master's bodyguards intervened, explaining that the boy was President's son. Wanted to know the reason it was important, prompting the bodyguard to offer a straightforward explanation. The boy was the heir to the Sung Group, Korea's third most powerful conglomerate. His sway over the business community surpassed that of anyone else. Repeated her question, pressing to understand why it was important. Realizing that this clueless person would never grasp the concept of the body. The bodyguard seizes the man and attempts to forcefully pin him against the wall, yet the effort proves futile as the man remains completely unmoved. Despite pouring every ounce of effort into the fight, he finds himself unable to budge Yammer, who remains firmly rooted and unshaken by the struggle. Wondered aloud whether anyone truly believed he would think more highly of the boy, simply because the boy's father held a significant position. The bodyguard questioned the man's intelligence, silently speculating about the dangerous creature he might have just angered. Pointed out that money did not equal true power, dismissing the other's claims as nonsense and insisting they all get back to his station. The man likely believes that his power allows him to break the law without consequences. In some places, people receive lighter punishments if they are found to be frail in body or mind. However, the reality facing him was far harsher, and he likely couldn't even grasp how unforgiving this world truly was. The bodyguard warned him not to assume he could act without consequences, making it clear that he also understood how to wield power. He started tearing his shirt apart, making sure to stop just in time so no one needed to cover up the moment. He changes his body into solid steel using a power known as Iron Fist, allowing him to increase his speed significantly. She delivered 2 swift hits in quick succession. With this newfound strength, he manages to strike so powerfully that is sent flying through the air. Convinced of his victory, the bodyguard begins to boast about his skills, even though there is no audience, driven by his inflated sense of self-importance. At that moment, remarked that it was unfortunate, since not only was he a total failure, but he lacked intelligence as well. The observer silently suggested that it might be wise to glance at what was happening behind the man. At that moment, suddenly appeared behind him and pointed out that he had now crossed the line into sin. The bodyguard managed to turn just in time to notice a fist speeding toward him, striking him but not with full force. Observes to himself that his own strength and endurance surpass what others might have expected at first glance. The bodyguard wondered aloud how the man could remain on his feet after everything he had suffered, yet firmly declared that he would not allow him to get up once more. He unleashes his full power in an attempt to hit, yet effortlessly avoids every drop of blood aimed at him. He exhales softly, puzzled by the shroud draped over his body. People always seem to invent the most unbelievable ideas. Feeling fed up with him, Yomer delivers a swift kick to his face and, with a swift motion, the attacker whirled through the air and delivered a powerful kick that struck the bodyguard directly in his unattractive face. He stood before the final verdict. As the first part of his sentence, he now faced the challenge of enduring the blow about to come his way. Discouraged the idea, warning that attempting it could result in a broken neck. The bodyguard realizes he is no match in any way, whether it comes to strength or speed. He wonders in disbelief about the identity of this mysterious man. It was clear to everyone that this being was anything but human. The impact forces the bodyguard's head down, burying it in the ground much like an ostrich hiding. Was not surprised by his behavior, yet she noticed a subtle difference in him, detecting a sense of vulnerability that hadn't been there before. Without warning, he addressed her directly, questioning the reason humans chose to wear shrouds, clothing meant for the deceased and in his view never intended for the living to don. Reassures him, explaining that there is no need to be overly concerned, since the measure simply serves as a way to keep everyone safe. More than 2 decades had passed since the dead first appeared in this world, and in the beginning, humanity faced great difficulties in defending themselves. The armor wondered aloud whether it was impossible for them to battle without relying on shrouds. Points out that compared to the dead, humans possess much less strength. As they made their way across the river's jagged rocks, vicious monsters lunged at them, sinking their teeth into their skin. Compelled to flee for centuries, they had no choice but to keep moving in order to escape being destroyed. With weights far too heavy for any person to move, he was ordered to free the land. As time passed, the most notorious sinners grew stronger the longer they served, eventually surpassing ordinary humans in power. Despite their fate, a few of the deceased decided to seek forgiveness and offered their burial shrouds to living people. In this way, people obtained the means to defend themselves. The majority took on the role of gravediggers, confronting any undead they met. However, some, like this reckless bodyguard, decided to follow a more self-serving route. Contorted his features in a display of confusion, yet calmly clarified that choosing the shroud had been unavoidable. She decided to speak directly, knowing that would only get confused if asked to explain anything. Greets him with a bright smile, expressing happiness at their reunion, and wonders aloud about how much time has passed since they last saw each other. No Ming estimated the time to be around 300 years, but questioned her behavior, wondering why she was acting as though they were already familiar with one another. Naming wondered if she had been visiting the human world without approval, feeling surprised that her appearance was unfamiliar to him. Acknowledging the passage of time, remarked that it truly had been a while since they last met. Despite everything, remains unaware of her true identity and continues to believe she is simply an ordinary person. Noticing the confusion on the fool's face, decides to inquire about the identity of the woman who is standing nearby. Revealed her name, leaving astonished to discover that not only was she human, but she also worked as a gravedigger. She wondered why the girl had shown up in this place. No explained that there was a complicated explanation behind her arrival, but for the moment, her situation mirrored their own. Felt a wave of sympathy for her, while Yammer insisted that pain was unnecessary for her. Kitty, now employed to take over God's responsibilities, considered that ought to disclose her true identity, thinking he might offer her a job as well. Then revealed that she held the title of the 12th honorary sign, known as Axis, and that her responsibilities included serving as Teal's assistant. They entered a different room, where admitted to her confusion about how things in hell had become so chaotic. She seemed to materialize out of nowhere, almost as if she'd been transported instantly. Yomer wondered aloud if she was aware of whereabouts, but she shook her head, unable to provide an answer. This realization causes him to yell out in anger, disappointed because he believed he had finally tracked down his enemy. Expressed regret for being unable to offer assistance, but reassured him, explaining that the situation concerned more than anyone else. He continued to question how events had unfolded to bring him here. He still doesn't know for sure whether anything actually happened too, but the surrounding turmoil leads him to suspect that might have planned the whole thing deliberately. Accepting this reality proved difficult, as it threatened to make everything even more complicated. Suspects there are gaps in his understanding, so to make up for it, she has been putting in extra effort in several areas. She feels confident that this particular sheet of paper will provide him with the answers he needs. Noticed her impressive skills and considered that she would excel in the divine workplace, even going so far as to offer her a position there. She declined the offer, yet she recognized that he probably had no interest in working there himself. Shifted the conversation by inquiring about, noting that she had not seen her in quite a while. Yomer shared that she had been assigned a straightforward task, her very first mission, and believed it would be completed quickly. At that moment, she pursued the young master across the city streets, waving her magic wand, while bystanders looked on in confusion, trying to figure out the commotion. When assigned her the responsibility, he passed his enchanted wand to her, causing her to plead with him to abandon his thoughts of punishing that student. He reminded her that she had nearly lost her life because of that man, insisting that by allowing her to take care of the situation, he was actually helping her. She nodded in agreement and inquired about her next steps, but with summoning him, hurried through his instructions. Her assignment is straightforward. She only needs to wave the magic wand and yell in this manner. At that moment, she shouted phrases such as "burn the sinner," along with other alarming words, which made the student pick up their pace and dash away even quicker. However, she found the situation incredibly humiliating. She finally realized the reason that woman had pinned her down. Unable to meet anyone's gaze out of embarrassment, she accidentally collided with a passerby and immediately began offering several apologies. As the figure spun to face her, it was revealed to be Park, who wasted no time in reprimanding her for disobeying the instructions to rest. She hurriedly offered an apology for her actions, but Park stopped her, assuring her that they would address the matter at another time. At that moment, realized she required assistance and wondered what actions were expected of her. At that moment, a mysterious person appeared nearby, strolling down the street with a sinister grin on their face. Park makes it clear that they must handle this person, regardless of what it might take. Wondered aloud if it was the right moment to handle the lifeless creature before them. Park declined their proposal, explaining that if they pursued him, he would simply evade capture, relying on his exceptional skills in escape and deception. They planned to trail closely behind him, watching carefully for any chance to launch an unexpected assault. Wondered about Park's constant scanning of their surroundings, and Park clarified that he was keeping watch as part of his patrol duties. She realizes that trusting her is difficult, especially since every time he travels through a place, a monstrous dead creature seems to appear soon after and leave destruction behind. It seemed likely that this man worked under him, yet there was no doubt he played a role in the situation. After watching him closely for some time, Park begins to suspect that his primary intention is to eliminate anything that stands in his path. Regrettably, the lifeless figure discovers the student, prompting Park to sprint frantically in an attempt to save him. Despite her speed, which surpasses that of ordinary people, she still reaches the scene after the critical moment has passed. The undead delivered a fierce blow. Despite the danger, the boy remains unharmed, as steps in just in time to save him from harm. The character came down and ended up right in the middle of a heap of garbage. Park acknowledges her impressive agility with a nod of approval before swiftly launching into an aggressive assault. Resolute in his determination to avoid another failure, he silently vowed that, regardless of the obstacles, retribution for his wrongdoings would be inevitable. She summoned the power of her scholar's mantle, its mark glowing with authority, then swung a gigantic hammer to send the lifeless foe flying. She instructed Wu to guide the civilian to safety and quickly request backup. Agreed to the plan, but insisted that Park must endure no matter what happened. Park urged her to move quickly, noting that her abilities were not suited for fighting. She stands in disbelief as the one she thought was defeated rises, completely unharmed by the previous attack. She knows she cannot let herself be caught off guard and is determined to avoid the attack no matter what it takes. She exchanged blows with her opponent, gradually edging out of his reach, yet the undead ignored her at first, his focus locked on seizing her weapon before anything else. When he manages to lift her off the ground, he secures the upper hand. He strikes her with a punch, but she retaliates by swinging her hammer and hitting him. Despite the effort, the strike appeared completely ineffective. Park comes to the urgent understanding that unless she braces herself against the ground quickly, she will lose the chance to attack with greater power and will end up vulnerable to her ruthless opponent. Without warning, the deceased individual triggered his own mantle. The phantom bat seized Park, forcefully hurling her against the walls several times before finally leaving her trapped within one of them. Convinced that the fight has ended, he gets ready to strike the final blow. Just then, Wu rushed in and delivered a powerful knee, arriving just in time to save the day. Park wondered aloud whether reinforcements would be arriving soon, while reassured him that she had already reached out to someone who was expected to arrive any minute. Park argues that this particular undead is unusual because it has the ability to wield mantles. To overcome him, A minimum of 2 gravediggers at level 1, along with a group of lower-level ones, would be required. Despite everything, acted so foolishly that she contacted just a single person. Quickly moved out of the way to avoid the attack from the undead opponent and raised her guard, expressing her confidence that survival was certain. In this lifetime, such a thing would not be possible. Park questioned internally, trying to make sense of the baffling statements coming from the foolish person before him. She also observes that demonstrates significantly greater skill during fights. The thought occurred that the red object might actually be a type of mantle. The injured undead, having endured numerous assaults, finally understood their tactics. The figure lowered themselves into a crouch and started moving in continuous circles around. Park cautioned her to stay alert, letting her know he was on the verge of activating his power. The dead one vanished from sight, using his stealth abilities to become invisible. Frantically searches for the location of the unseen spirit, but she quickly discovers his presence when he catches sight of her. An unexpected blow lands on her back, nearly overwhelming her defenses as she struggles to raise her guard in time. The deceased adversary appeared to favor swift attacks, vanishing immediately after each blow and compelling her to hunt for his whereabouts once more. She could only guess what might happen, and when the wind changed direction, she turned to see what was behind her. The deceased figure appeared beside her and managed to strike her effectively. He disappeared again, leaving feeling lost and confused, unable to tell where the figure had been. Adding to her unease, she found herself distracted by the bell dangling from his ear, suspecting it was meant to unsettle her. Despite the ongoing battle, she pressed on. All at once, she sensed a strike approaching from her right side. As expected, Wu skillfully evaded the attack, leaving the corpse deeply displeased by his successful escape. Wanted to know how Park had discovered his whereabouts, and Park revealed that her mantle, called the Enigma of the Scholar, granted her that ability. No matter what she attacked, even a single blow ensured that her watchful eyes would never lose sight of it. Park assures that she will lead him through the fight, asking only for his trust in return. Wasted no time in agreeing, her trust evident as she shut her eyes to prove just how much faith she had in the other person. At first, Park appeared moved by her actions, but his expression quickly shifted to anger as he started shouting at her. He couldn't believe she would risk something so reckless in the middle of a fight, questioning whether she even cared about her own safety. Hastily expresses regret, admitting that her imagination has been influenced by watching an excessive number of films. They faced a genuine fight ahead, knowing they had to move carefully. Without hesitation, she identifies and announces where the next strike will come from. With every approach, successfully finds a way to land. The relentless force of war battered the lifeless body, leaving it powerless to do anything except endure the constant onslaught. The struggle went on, gradually turning into an uneven fight where only one side kept taking the hits. A peculiar figure appeared, one of the followers known as John. He also reflected on how unexpectedly frightening the Grey Vigors had become in recent times. Because he had assigned this man to patrol duty, he realized it was his responsibility to intervene. It would be unfortunate if someone with such potential were to vanish after death. Additionally, he preferred not to face reprimand from that individual. He then lowers himself down and urges the group to leave his friend alone. Shot him a sharp look, wanting to find out his identity, but Park intervened and instructed her to step aside. This newcomer was one of the important figures she had spoken of before, John, the disciple. He found it puzzling that she called him a big shot, especially since his thin frame hardly looked impressive, yet he felt a sense of satisfaction knowing they recognized him. Shifting focus to the main issue, the question arose whether he could reclaim his companion. Among the deceased, those capable of moving unseen were exceptionally uncommon, making such a skill a rarity. Essentially, he was requesting an unusual favor, no matter how odd it might seem. Before he has a chance to complete his thought, a sudden hammer strike crashes into his face. Park firmly announces that any attempts at negotiation with those who have already passed away are futile. She instructs Wu to retreat, explaining that the heightened intelligence and communication among the dead stem from a specific cause. He completed his statement while launching his attack, explaining that this signified the dead had already claimed countless lives. She had already discovered that fact, much to everyone's surprise. Despite this, he continued to mock her boldness for coming near him, given her obvious weakness. Called out for Park, but before he could reach her, hurled her down onto the ground. Despite witnessing her being mercilessly beaten right in front of her, the girl astonishingly found the strength to launch another attack. She was undeniably brave, yet she remained unaware of the deep contempt he felt for those like her. He called upon the forbidden power of, acting as the priest of, and summoned a giant tornado that battered with relentless, cutting winds. Let out a laugh and questioned whether anyone still had the urge to strike. The speaker questioned why anyone would be concerned about the elderly woman, pointing out that the listener had their entire future still before them. The figure suggested that running away was the best option, expressing a harsh opinion that humans were hopelessly selfish and weak, caring only about their own needs. People at their core act like creatures indifferent to the well-being of those around them. Such disregard reveals their genuine character. Completed his strike, fully expecting the injured girl to run away. However, his anger intensifies when he notices that, rather than fleeing, something else is happening. Instead of running away, she decides to stay behind and shield the woman from danger. He wondered aloud why she would bother defending anything now, but remained silent, and her lack of response only fueled his growing frustration. In modern times, people prioritize their own well-being above all else, believing that selflessness offers no real benefits. Wanted to share two thoughts with him. The first was that she never required a reason to help another person. The second was that he had now crossed a line and carried a new guilt. The moment her words leave her lips, a powerful urge washes over Yuchi, urging her to stay completely still, barely daring to draw a breath. Following that moment, the protagonist admitted to the other person that he had committed a wrongdoing, feeling so ashamed that he could not even bring himself to face them. He chooses not to act, fully aware that the true threat lurks just at his back. Clutching his talisman with determination, he braces himself for whatever may come. Moved closer to Wu, noticing her injuries and expressed concern for her well-being. Insists that she is all right, yet emphasizes the importance of helping Park, as assistance is needed for her. At this moment, her breaths grew faint, and the colors of her cloak started to vanish. With a casual gesture, surrounds both himself and his companion in the confines of his own realm. He reassures that she has nothing to fear since he is by her side. Chum appreciated the kindness of his employer, while Yomer reflected on how intimidating he must have appeared moments earlier. His thoughts about himself are suddenly cut off as Naming bursts onto the scene, yelling loudly. Realizes he ought to start their exchange with kinder words rather than his usual bluntness. Naming, however, dismisses this thought, insisting that a more urgent matter requires their attention. This prompts to question whether Naming is suggesting they spend 5 centuries turning a millstone. That consequence awaited anyone who spoke with such vulgar language. Observed quietly, realizing he had overestimated the man's significance, and now felt his earlier concern had been unnecessary. He attempts to warn that there will be consequences for making jokes at his expense. At that instant, he is sent flying a great distance by the combined force of him and Young. He believes that allowing the person even a single breath would squander precious oxygen. Reached his limit and questioned whether would ever be able to forgive him. Yammer wondered aloud about the reason behind the sudden attack, confused by the situation. He questioned what was being discussed, pointing out that Yuchi had never been the main focus to begin with. His top priority had always been tending to those he harmed. However, at this moment, he found himself with an abundance of time. At that moment, both individuals unleashed their abilities simultaneously, filling the air with swirling bursts of red and green energy that scattered in every direction. Despite its protective cloak, Yelmer's superior strength allowed his strike to cut through it with ease. Stumbled backward, yet pressed on relentlessly, refusing to let up. With a single decisive move, he surged ahead, ramming his shoulder forcefully into Bushi. In a moment of utter despair, he resorted to unleashing the 8 gates of folly. Yammer remained motionless, leading to believe he had successfully captured him. Sealed Yammer within the ability, which then started to slice through. Compares to an empty cart, claiming she creates a racket without having anything worthwhile within her. He called forth an immense sword, then delivered a forceful blow. Let out a laugh, amused by the fact that no one had ever managed to break free from his power before, and his cloak now lay tightly sealed because of it. He stood triumphant, having secured an unquestionable win. Yet just then his power disappeared without a trace. Yammer acknowledged the complexity of the skill, yet he believed that the statement did not pertain to his own abilities. The force surrounding him was not merely a cloak, it was genuine hellfire. Flames surged upward, originating from the shadowy abyss of the underworld. The flame relentlessly devours anyone who has sinned, and as a result of his countless wrongdoings, strength continues to increase. Stands frozen in disbelief, while calmly offers him some guidance. The character cautioned against pressing their teeth too firmly into the earth. As a powerful blow heads straight for him, stands his ground, determined not to surrender, and prepares himself once more. At that moment, he unleashed the power of the 8-gate seal, while simultaneously hurling another sword to counter the attack. Despite all his efforts, the assault continues relentlessly, and his victory proves powerless to stop it. The man attempted to put out the raging hellfire by casting small gusts of wind. Despite his efforts to delay the attack and make a quick escape, remains close by, ready to capitalize on every mistake, and delivers a powerful punch to stop him. He relentlessly unleashed waves of hellfire, and had grown tired of witnessing the same attack repeatedly. He lay motionless, utterly drained, as the flames swallowed him without mercy. Is overwhelmed by the oppressive heat, sensing his body might dissolve right into the earth beneath him. Yammer questioned in his mind why he had not been reduced to ashes, while Naming explained that there was nothing further they could do with him. He had entrusted both his sword and cloak to. Ming proposed the idea of casting the man into hell and departing, reasoning that time flowed differently between hell and the human realm. Had entirely overlooked his ability to do that, a fact that did not catch Naming off guard. He had also relocated the humans to a secure location for now, which meant had no reason for concern. Additionally, he claimed the magical staff from the woman, an action that brought great satisfaction to. Observed that the subordinate showed great competence, especially considering how absent-minded his master could be. This observation led Yomer to question whether was actually hoping for someone else to take his place. As the conversation continues, seizes the opportunity to break free, realizing that with the monster's attention elsewhere, this might be his sole chance to make a getaway. It was crucial that someone alerted the individual about the man, urging them to steer clear of him entirely, since his level of danger exceeded what anyone there could handle. Quickly spotted his effort to escape and lowered himself, demanding to know where the boy thought he was headed. Due to the circumstances, is forced to set aside his dignity and plead desperately. He realizes that his actions were wrong. He pleads desperately, silently wishing that will be deceived by his performance. Rather than giving him a direct response, however, decides to recount an old tale. On a gloomy afternoon, a grieving mother ventured into the depths of hell in search of her lost child. The ruler of the underworld inquired about her reason for visiting, and she explained that she was there because her son had passed away. The king inquired about the cause, and she explained that he was the one responsible. Because he had both instigated the conflict and worsened the hunger, the responsibility for the suffering rested on his shoulders. Despite her hopes, the ruler of the underworld was already aware of all that had transpired. The truth was that he had initiated the conflict himself and allowed his people to go hungry. However, her behavior revealed that she was the real wrongdoer in that situation. He came to realize that in the end, all sinners remain unchanged. In difficult situations, they choose to deceive repeatedly rather than tell the truth. They felt a strong aversion to the possibility of experiencing a similar fate themselves. He found them exasperating, which led him to design a place like hell specifically for those individuals. Singh's confidence crumbles at those words, leaving him momentarily shaken. However, after a brief pause for reflection, a noticeable shiver runs through him. The fear that once held him captive fades away, replaced by newfound resolve. Because he ruled solely over the underworld, he refused to show deference to him, regardless of the circumstances. He unleashed a new wind technique called Wind Dragon, aiming its power at in an attempt to inflict damage. Had already begun to pass judgment on him. The man carried himself without any hint of guilt or responsibility, unfamiliar with the concept of regret. As ruler of the underworld, would put a permanent end to his cycle of rebirth. While channeling energy through his staff, he initiated the first form of Saul, known as. With a single, fluid movement, he slices his opponent in two, bringing an abrupt end to every one of his remaining lives simultaneously. No observed disappear completely, both physically and mentally, and reflected on how much time had passed since such a moment had occurred. The last time he witnessed that move, it was called the Soul Bonds. Due to the overwhelming force unleashed, his magical staff broke apart into pieces. This outcome was hardly surprising, given that the stick he had found was just a regular one lying on the ground. Despite the absence of his sword and mantle, Naming remains astonished by the immense strength he is able to display. He had achieved this solely through his own power, relying on nothing beyond himself. Once finished his tasks, he suggested that they find a place to unwind, pointing out how they had both been up since early morning. They had earned the right to rest, as was only natural. Their usual retreat for relaxation was his apartment, where she questioned whether his visit was truly just for unwinding. Invited her to take a seat and assured her that she could relax, explaining that there was no need to be concerned just because he happened to be her boss. He leans back, taking a calm sip of his drink, while assures him she'll handle it, insisting that it's no trouble at all. Since it was her own home, she wondered why she should have to feel uneasy there. Put on an innocent expression, agreeing wholeheartedly. He had always recognized her intelligence. Quickly understood that he was making fun of her. Although she wanted to retaliate, she knew she couldn't risk her job by reacting. Rather than offering her own place, she recommends that he stay with, assuming likely resides in a large, luxurious house. Believes that staying at a subordinate's home is preferable, reasoning that visiting the residence of an unfamiliar person would not reflect the closeness of true friendship. Believed his words reflected their own circumstances, and although she hesitated, she eventually gave in and offered to help him look for an apartment too. Misheard what she said, thinking she mentioned the word fart, and burst into laughter, acting so childishly that she reminded her of a little kid. She reached her limit and told him that she required her own space, which meant he couldn't remain there any longer. Determined to help, she decided to look for a studio apartment nearby for him instead. Yammer confessed his unfamiliarity with the situation, yet recalled facing similar experiences before. Because of this, he decided not to stand in her way and promised he would step aside if she genuinely felt uneasy. He hoped that by doing so, neither of them would harbor any hard feelings. He stands up and makes a move toward the exit, but pauses to inquire if any sinners are present nearby for him to trouble before leaving. Is fully aware of his methods for handling people like that, and warns him sternly to dismiss the idea from his mind. He questions her hesitation, believing that those who have sinned should always face consequences. Expresses concern about the flaws in his approach, prompting to assure him she will be careful, even though she remains skeptical of her own promise. He maintains with conviction that he is truly capable of being gentle. She decided to challenge him by presenting a test. Spotting an elderly woman suffering from a grave illness nearby, she used the situation as her example. One afternoon, she carelessly discarded her trash along the roadside and left it behind. He wondered how he should respond to her actions. Yomer insisted that the only fitting punishment would be to toss her into a bubbling cauldron of hot pitch. This harsh suggestion startled, who let out a terrified scream. The tension quickly escalated, as both began arguing furiously, neither able to grasp what the other was trying to say. As the central rule intensifies, the two begin to clash more fiercely, resembling quarreling cats and dogs, while watches them with the weary patience of someone used to managing constant chaos. Noticing retreat, he extends his own glass of water toward her, offering it in a silent gesture. When she accepts the glass, she immediately realizes that the water inside is an unusually vibrant shade of blue. She wanted to know where had found it, but suspected she was trying to pick an argument again. Before he could respond, No Ming stepped in and replied on his behalf. They fetched water from a nearby well, immediately feared something bad, while observed that with wells in every household, their standard of living must have greatly improved. Hurries into the bathroom and discovers that the water in the toilet has turned blue, the sight leaving her so shocked she almost loses consciousness right then and there. And moved closer, and in a light-hearted moment, she clarified that the water available at that spot could not be safely consumed. As she sat perched on the toilet, she began to describe the situation, her words tumbling out in a steady stream. Gradually, an overwhelming sense of hopelessness consumes them, pulling them further into the depths of despair. Both he and eventually sank to the floor, overcome with exhaustion. Following the catastrophe, receives a set of pajamas and breaks down in tears, overwhelmed with regret for his actions. Arrived carrying actual water, explaining that since circumstances had reached this stage, she was responsible for looking after him. As a result, she suggested that they could just live together. Notices her sudden shift in demeanor, causing embarrassment to wash over him as he retreats slightly. In exchange, she hopes to have her pay increased, ideally doubled if that can be arranged. Gazes at her, noticing a striking resemblance to a person from his past, someone who had longed to experience life as a human in their next existence. Because of this, he rises to his feet and inquires whether she is a descendant of a deity. Ju felt confused, unable to grasp the meaning behind his words. The idea of being a descendant of a god left Ju puzzled and uncertain. Yammer believes the situation is straightforward and insists on receiving a response. Felt drained by the situation, growing weary as the same foolish behavior began to appear once again. He struggled to recall the features of those he met, his memory often failing him. It never crossed his mind that he might have simply mistaken for another person. Shook his head and insisted that he genuinely sensed traces of a divine presence lingering inside her. Moved nearer and urged him to consider the situation carefully. The individual likely on their mind was, yet she bore no resemblance to this ordinary woman. He wondered if he could still recall the sound of her voice. Once promised that he would always remember, but after a long, telling pause, Naming came to understand that had already let the memory slip away. He held no resentment toward him, knowing that had always behaved this way. However, the woman standing before them was named Wu. No Ming made an effort to remember her name, thinking it was the least he could do if they were going to be partners from now on. She felt a sense of surprise upon realizing that No Ming knew her name, which showed her that he had actually been paying attention. Despite his usually grumpy demeanor, he possessed a surprising kindness. When questioned how he could be certain she wasn't, No Ming responded that the answer was clear to him. Possessed a talent that far surpassed this woman's, outshining her by a factor of 10. Still, there was something undeniably captivating about her. The moment realized this, she angrily turned the bottle over and gave Naming the retribution he had coming. Loud screams echoed so intensely that they reached beyond the walls, audible to anyone nearby. After finishing dinner and as night settled in, the three of them lay in bed beside the main character. Sat comfortably on a blanket he had quickly grown fond of, appreciating this unfamiliar way of living that he had never experienced before. Everyone remained unconvinced that this place offered any improvement over their previous existence in hell. Observes that humans seem to be thriving lately, and he can't help but feel a touch of envy toward the way they live. Rose to her feet and wondered aloud whether their fondness for the human world was truly that strong. They agreed, noting that even the meals she prepared tasted wonderful. No Ming nodded in agreement once more, and together they searched their memories for the soup's name, eventually deciding to call it Mr. Soup. Was surprised to see humans consuming such food without a second thought, while observed that the dish contained the happiness and hardships experienced by an average person named Mr. As both of them offered compliments, his expression contorted with shock, realizing they were praising what she had served as kimchi soup, not Mr. himself. She lets their mistake go unchallenged, her exhaustion weighing too heavily for her to speak up. Following a brief conversation, and Naming appeared to be perfectly in sync, their thoughts aligning as they suddenly conceived a clever plan together. They quickly get to their feet and carefully make sure is comfortable, knowing she must be worn out from everything she has done. Feels puzzled by their sudden attentiveness, but simply urges her to take it easy. Being tucked in by the King of Hell was a rare experience, so the best thing to do was relax and go with it. Once the face mask was carefully placed on her, the pair attempted to quietly slip into the kitchen. However, Jewel cautioned them, making it clear that she would catch them if they tried to take any meat without her knowing. And No Ming's expressions turned somber, and she realized with surprise that they had truly intended to go through with it. They seemed completely incapable of restraining themselves. Lies on his back, his eyes fixed on the ceiling as thoughts of the day's events swirl through his mind. She encountered and found herself sent to hell on 2 separate occasions. With Park's assistance, she managed to catch the deceased and even. Whenever she suffered injuries, her wounds would mend themselves upon her arrival in the underworld. The question prompted her to turn to, wondering aloud if a person's injuries or sickness would disappear upon their first arrival in hell. No believes that people become better when they arrive, yet observes that the experience is not the same for those who have already passed away. Questioned whether collaborating with him might give her a chance to encounter someone who had already passed away. Yomer rose to her feet, questioning the reason anyone would wish to encounter additional corpses. She expresses her desire to visit her parents. She still carried a heavy sorrow, haunted by her inability to shield them in the past. Naming quickly responds that she is unable to do it because she is only human. People are restricted by certain boundaries that define what they are capable of accomplishing. Whenever he attempted to persuade her to surrender, struck him with such force that he lost consciousness on the spot. Wondered aloud about the sudden action, but he interrupted her, urging her to stay silent and reassuring her that Ming was merely asleep. They realized it was impossible to wake him at that moment. Admitted responsibility for putting him to sleep and attempted to bring him back, but instead, his soul began to slip away from his body, filling her with greater fear. Remembers her earlier words about not wanting to lose another person. She points out that this was exactly what she had meant earlier. Because of her kindness and generous spirit, he decided to make her an offer. If she contributes significantly to finding, permission will be granted for her to visit her parents. His eyes widened with surprise at what he heard, and he questioned whether the promise was truly sincere. Yomer nodded in agreement, acknowledging that he had reached a point of no return. She warned him that if he tried to withdraw, her fate would be sealed in hell. Unfazed, Yomer remarked that he had already experienced hell before, so facing it again would make little difference to him. She ignored everything else, too busy rejoicing alongside No Ming's drifting spirit. Seeing her happiness brings a small smile to his face, reminding him that he must hurry to find if he wants to keep his word. In another location, a towering presence insists that the other person restate their previous words. Yuchi bowed respectfully and explained that his other self had been utterly annihilated. His expression made it appear that his very spirit had been shattered. He learned that the method affecting the soul was called soul. He felt certain because he knew only one individual who possessed that power. Yelmer possessed now, and it seemed likely he would soon be after them. The deep, commanding tone came from, whose gaze fixed intently on after the statement was made. Implied that he had delivered some corpses to help bring Srain to an end. He never gets the chance to complete his thought. In the blink of an eye, his body is violently torn to pieces. Admitted that his own arrogance had been overwhelming, and he found it shameful that he had failed to show proper respect to the king of the underworld. He called for a person known as Wu and instructed him to gather the remaining bodies, emphasizing the need to move quickly with their plan. Before Yammer could fully recover his power, the 12 Zodiacs had to strike and prevent his resurgence. Though gives his assurance that he will carry out the task as instructed. The following day, gets a phone call from. The caller expressed regret for reaching out at such an early hour, explaining that concern for his well-being prompted the call. Approached to investigate and noticed him barking at a small white puppy. It was believed that white dogs had the power to keep spirits away. Flinched as Wu's piercing screams filled the air, realizing that the outburst was a sign Wu was actually unharmed. Expressed regret for interrupting, and encouraged her to share what she had intended to say. Shared her intention to inform about the updated mission, emphasizing that needed to skip work for the day and help him instead. In addition, she realized there was another task she needed to handle since his style of dressing appeared old-fashioned. They had gone to the mall to pick out trendy outfits for. He found it unexpected that had come up with the idea, yet he had to admit to himself that the clothes felt surprisingly comfortable. Human inventions truly have no equal. Questions inwardly whether they're actually headed in the correct direction, noticing their path leads toward a department store, while appears unfazed. Yomer nodded in agreement, acknowledging that the information had indeed been recorded on that sheet of paper. Realized too late that had already given it to them, and only at this moment did they notice the writing on the reverse side. It became clear to that must lead a very modest and thrifty life. Reflected on the importance of careful saving as a key to a good life, and emphasized that because the environment is so valuable, it is essential to recycle as much as possible. Was surprised by the King of Hell's response, yet her curiosity about the mysterious paper grew even stronger. Clarifies that it comes from a simple book, the kind that keeps track of when people die. Recognizes the saying, understanding it to be a book that keeps track of lives and individuals. Without hesitation, she challenges him, questioning his ease in tearing a page from such a revered text. However, casually suggests that she probably just tucked the page away in her pocket or somewhere similar. Teeters on the edge of losing control, her thoughts racing with anxiety over how others might react when they witness the scene. Reassures her, explaining that humans are unable to understand the text. Still, based on what it says, their task is to search for the creature somewhere in this central region. Next, the task was to locate a famous person. Felt her patience wearing thin and had half a mind to hit the guy. But she held back and instead demanded that he clarify his point rather than acting recklessly. Follows her suggestion and explains that the zodiac signs who entered this world were forced to look for work in order to get by. This specific individual had been chosen to join. He was unsure of the meaning, but remembered that had explained they were famous people, and had told him they would show up at this place because it was part of their plans. Wondered aloud about the zodiac sign, and Yammer explained that it was the pig. The sign reappeared, directing attention to he, who was just about done throwing up at that moment. Her phone rang unexpectedly as her manager reached out to contact her. She wonders aloud whether she could truly be that foolish. She had been clearly instructed to avoid eating while the recording was in progress. She continued to repeat her actions without stopping. She failed to see what was obvious to others. She was moving forward in the right direction, but it was important for her to focus on her well-being and how she presented herself. Dot admitted that she always disposed of her food by flushing it down the toilet. A wave of sadness settled over her thoughts while her manager offered words of praise for her actions. Despite this feeling, she remained certain that her choices were best for herself. Realizes that there's nothing more she can do. The manager then hangs up, leaving in disbelief that has repeated her actions once more. She struggled to restrain her impulses, behaving with little self-control, much like a pig. Meanwhile, a delivery man inquired whether he should drop off the clothes they had requested. After receiving an order there, the manager instantly changed the way she spoke. She realized he worked for CH Company and instructed him to set the clothes down on the table before leaving. After following the instructions he was given, the boy walked away, sensing a change in her mood. Unsure of how to respond, he remained silent. A man, whose appearance could easily be confused with that of a canon, inquires about the specific day he previously mentioned. The manager showed no interest in beginning, and consistently ignored everyone else's input. He worried that her error might force them back onto the streets, and wondered if he should speak up as well. According to the canon, he manages their finances carefully, making sure their funds never run dry, even as he finds himself on the losing side of a wager. Feeling the familiar rumble in his stomach, he realized it was time for them to find something to eat. As they prepare to leave, moves to block their path. The canon realizes with some regret that she has eaten once more, which leaves him feeling disappointed. Offered another apology, yet the canon reassured her that everything would be acceptable provided she refrained from repeating her actions. However, was now required to remain in place until they finished their meal and came back. Dada mustered up her bravery and requested a small portion of food as well, assuring everyone that she intended to save it for later rather than eat it immediately. After the filming ended, she planned to take action, leaving the manager stunned by her boldness. The canon swivels toward her, questioning whether she truly is a pig. He reminds her once again of how often he has insisted that she must stay slim for the pictures. Despite believing she merits even less, they still permit her a single meal each day. Mentioned that she had begun experiencing frequent dizziness and was nearly fainting regularly, while the rest of the actors had already eaten lunch. Doing his best to mimic a monkey, the canon attempted to figure out if she was suggesting that the villains were present. Firmly refused to admit anything, yet the canon reached out, seizing her and expressing how much it hurt to witness her in such a state. She seemed to have forgotten the moment when they first crossed paths. He noticed her on the sidewalk, standing quietly with the posture of someone asking for help. He provided her with clothing, shelter, and meals. He allowed her to experience life as an ordinary person, but only when she was with him. Offered an apology, explaining that her words were not intended in that manner, while the canon noted that making mistakes is a universal experience. The character wondered if all families argued in this way. When hears that word, her expression brightens with excitement. Afterward, the others head out, cautioning her to behave herself and avoid any mischief. After they left, people would mock her, claiming she was foolish enough to trust anything as long as someone used that particular word. Spun on her heel and began to skip away, her uncomfortable shoes clacking against the ground. A wide smile spread across her face, delighted that at last someone had acknowledged her as part of their family. Suddenly, the mood in the area shifts as a towering individual addresses those nearby. Witnessing a zodiac sign endure such disrespect from ordinary humans could only be described as a catastrophe. Despite everything, the responsibility to release her from this suffering would fall upon them. She gathers her belongings without delay, prepared to accompany him at once since has called for her. Ivan the Terrible appeared before them. Confused by Ivan's words, asked for clarification, prompting Ivan to explain in simpler terms. Had called for her, and now she needed to get ready to depart without delay. His mind swirled with uncertainty, unable to understand how possessed the power to call upon her. Everyone else had already perished. She wondered why was not delivering this message to her in person. Ivan openly acknowledges his own death, making no attempt to conceal the truth. However, he remains unfazed by the revelation. Decides not to leave, feeling that she now belongs to a family. She found herself unable to leave them behind. Ivan stared at her in confusion, noticing how she spoke about those humans as though they were truly her own family. Had assumed that such things would be clear. The humans had shown her kindness and looked after her, in contrast to who had left her behind and vanished to an unknown place. She considered it her right to call them family, since they had offered her both shelter and a new life. Ivan's annoyance increased as he listened to her speak, remembering the rumors about her lack of intelligence, yet feeling that her behavior now surpassed anything he had expected. He grabbed her firmly, questioning whether their actions could truly be described as simply looking after her. She needed to notice how thin her own body was before anything else. Someone questioned who had really been looking after whom, their thoughts lingering on the girl and what she had done. She was taken advantage of due to her naivety, so it was time for her to awaken as a zodiac sign. She realized that they were the only family she would ever know. Despite everything, remains unwilling to go. Once the canon and the manager finish their meal, they stroll along together, engaging in a lively conversation about a range of topics. At that moment, showed up and questioned the canon about whether he was the leader of entertainment. Despite everything, he remained known as the canon since that title suited him best. He nods, assuring them of his identity, while hesitates, searching for the right words to ask a question. Yelmer shoved her out of the way and questioned the man, wondering aloud if he was acting like a pig. Wastes no time in addressing the question, clearly finding it impolite and inappropriate. Remains confused, unable to grasp the situation, even though he is inquiring about exactly the right thing. The man's face shone with an oily sheen, his stomach bulged with enough force to topple a fortress, and his scalp was bare of hair. In appearance, he embodied the very essence of a pig. Continued to insist that it wasn't right, but the cannon's patience began to wear thin, and frustration started to show on his face. Because the boy had just insulted him by calling him a pig, he insisted that the boy say it again. The manager steps in to intervene, suggesting that the man was likely only making a remark about his good looks. Despite being moments away from attacking one another, both remain unaware as the cannon continues its relentless pursuit of him. The manager pleaded with him to control his actions, explaining that she couldn't bear to see him end up in prison once more. They seemed content and relaxed, their hunger satisfied and their mood cheerful in that moment. Due to her constant talking, the cannon had found someone new to blame for his frustration. In the waiting room, nervously chewed on her nails, sitting beside her untouched food and silently wishing for a positive outcome. As soon as they reach their destination, she springs to her feet, suddenly aware that there's something important she must share with him. She suddenly catches sight of the manager's bruised face and, concerned, inquires about the cause of the injury. She rushed over to help her, yet the cannon coldly declared that the outcome was justified. He wondered aloud whether he had actually asked if the other person had struck her. He notices that her actions seem routine, recognizing her familiar attempts to influence him once again. Felt a deep sense of concern for the manager and questioned what actions they ought to take next. The cannon noticed the meal laid out on her table and inquired about its nature, his keen eyesight allowing him to take in every detail. He smashed the food beneath his foot, mocking her by claiming that eating was all she cared about, comparing her to a greedy animal in a cruel game. Hurt by what he heard, nevertheless rushed over to him and urged him to escape, revealing that everything happening was merely a test. The creation came from someone with a truly wicked heart. She realized she couldn't put her feelings into words, yet hoped others would believe in her anyway. She refers to him as her father, and the force of the cannon knocks her down in response. He refused to accept being addressed as father by someone he saw as greedy and piggish. Ivan stepped out from the adjacent room, his excitement clear as he realized he finally had a reason to act. He was a person who struggled to keep his feelings in check, often letting them burst out at those around him, sometimes through actions and other times in different ways. He possessed a sharp tongue that many believed should be silenced forever, yet he had already confessed to that a person like himself would never truly belong to anyone else's family. He grabs his large head, wondering to himself what the outcome would be if he continued down this same path. Even if had never appeared, there was nothing but misery in store for him, and he was destined to endure torment, just as the worthless person he had always been. He announced his intention to end's life immediately, declaring that she would soon be freed from her worldly attachments. He intends to handle the woman as well, but when he glances over, he notices that has already taken hold of her, and is questioning what their next move should be. Simultaneously, gently takes hold of, reassuring them that asking questions isn't necessary. The needs of the victims were always given priority, right from the beginning. The character approaches and inquires about the group's activities. After taking a deep breath, they shouted urgently, telling Wu to escape. She silently questions what plans they have for the captive. Yammer fixed his gaze on her, announcing that he would see to it that this specific piece of garbage was discarded correctly. Instructed the group to lower the sinners, but Yammer refused, expressing his reluctance. Ivan explains that he isn't asking the other person to apprehend them. Instead, he assures that they will arrive here right away. Wondered aloud about Ivan's actions, recalling that Ivan had previously warned he would retaliate if they went through with it. Ivan, reaching his limit, lunged forward and rushed toward his opponent. Yammer believes he must remain calm, noticing that although Ivan appears upset and enraged, Ivan keeps searching the area with his eyes, clearly seeking an escape from his predicament. He continued to cradle the chubby one in his arms, leaving others to wonder about his reasons. He realized that if he managed to conceal, he might stand a chance to fight back. However, he also knew that, no matter what, innocent bystanders would still be drawn into the conflict. He encouraged to regain consciousness as Ivan launched an attack, but swiftly evaded the blow. Despite everything, uncertainty about his next move continued to trouble his thoughts. He wondered how he could battle his opponent without putting innocent bystanders or nearby buildings at risk. Ivan realizes that his only option is to keep running, leaving no room for the other person to decide. In an effort to compel him, he launches a chunk of pavement with great force. A mother spent time engaging with her child in play. Lacked the ability to turn back time, whereas possessed that unique power. She seized the slab and used its force to hurl herself aside. They veered off course and crashed into the wall nearby. The mother tries to make sense of the unexpected events that just unfolded. Before long, a notification appeared on each person's watch, alerting everyone at once. A warning about an impending disaster spread rapidly after authorities detected an ominous, lifeless force, prompting everyone to leave the area in haste. At last, the mother realized the situation and gently reassured her daughter, urging her not to shed any tears while leading her out in a composed manner. Ivan felt a surge of frustration wash over him when he realized he had missed his target. Yammer had probably read the message from that undertaker. He threatened that any attempt to escape would result in the humans' deaths. His sole desire centered on obtaining the Zodiac sign, making it clear that surrendering her was their only option. Pays no attention, feeling only a wave of relief as the idea sets off the alarm, granting him a brief moment to catch his breath. Ivan urged the other boy to pay attention, but at that exact moment, Yomer suddenly sprang into action. Ivan tracked the incoming assault, realizing there was no way he could evade it while suspended in the air. Understood that avoiding him was impossible, but she also realized that Ivan had no way to escape either. He conjures a vision of hell below their feet, forcing. Both of them were pulled down into the underworld. Intercepted strike without any difficulty. Naming showed up as well and instantly identified the man. Many people considered him the terrible one. A man spent his days driven by a fierce, unstoppable energy, much like a storm filled with lightning. His father left his first wife after realizing she was unable to have children. After that, he married a different woman, and she became the mother of Ivan. The archbishop disapproved of this behavior and responded by placing a curse on his descendants. From the moment his son was born, evil would dwell within him. The nation would become tainted, as the lives of innocents were claimed and blood poured through the land like unending rivers. Due to his son's insatiable hunger for violence and disorder, his homeland faced utter ruin. Ivan attempts to land a blow on Yomer, who. He simply evades the attack and wonders aloud whether Naming's insanity has grown stronger over the years. No man acknowledged this, pointing out that Ivan had even subjected his pregnant daughter-in-law to a savage beating. After swinging and missing once more, Ivan confessed that he had taken a life in the past. After that incident, the crown prince condemned him so harshly that he died, and it was at that moment his long-dormant madness surged back to life. His anger flared when he saw the man weeping for what he had done, because he believed that those who committed such terrible acts were incapable of feeling guilt for their victims. Naming opened his mouth to speak, but before he could finish, interrupted him and insisted that he let the matter go. The first step, as with all those who have sinned, was to deliver a harsh punishment. Before he has a chance to respond, Ivan launches a fierce blow that catches him off guard. Nomek reprimands him, making it clear that attacking someone during a speech is unacceptable. He checked on his well-being, and in response, held onto him with a strong grip. He expressed a desire to use the mantle temporarily. He had to handle this troublemaker swiftly and effectively. Naming stubbornly held onto his mantle, striking in protest. The last time Naming had let borrow it, chaos had erupted because of his actions. Assured him there was no need to be so protective, promising to use it briefly before returning it right away. The man was aware of his own forgetfulness, yet he understood that his mantle came with its own unintended consequences. As he attempts to clarify the situation, Ivan launches another assault, prompting Noming to yell at him in frustration. In the midst of his conversation, he demanded to know the reason behind the sudden attack. Ivan acted once more, warning that one should never relax their vigilance when confronted with deception. In an effort to prevent anyone from feeling more uncomfortable, Young took action. Before Ivan could get another word out, he was struck with surprising speed, something he hadn't anticipated. He makes another attempt to talk, but before he can get any words out, strikes him with a powerful punch that sends him skidding across the surface of the water. Ivan started to gather his energy, puzzled by the figure before him and questioning what kind of being he was facing, as the stranger's appearance and presence were far from anything human. He realized that his only option in this moment was to put forth every ounce of his strength. He began to draw energy into both of his hands. Yammer remained still, leaving him puzzled about the cause. It was obvious to everyone that he was getting ready for a powerful assault, yet the man remained completely still, refusing to make a move. At that moment, realization dawns on him. He made another attempt to say something, but Yomer struck him with a swift punch. Naming realizes what's happening too, noticing that strikes him each time he tries to speak. The supervisor often displayed a remarkable level of pettiness. Ivan's anger intensified, as he demanded to know how anyone could have the audacity to treat him with such disrespect. Suddenly appeared behind him, making it clear that he had no idea who was attacking him. He would discover the truth before long, facing the searing judgment of the flames as punishment for his sins. He unleashed his power and delivered a blow to Ivan, who could do nothing to shield himself from the sudden assault. Although the flames touch him, they do not consume him entirely. Yammer recalls how this situation reminds him of his previous encounter with Yuchi. He possessed neither strength, nor weapon, nor title. He had to secure one of those items, or at the very least, locate a temporary substitute. Ivan hit the man once more, and in that moment the truth of his opponent's identity finally dawned on him. It seemed certain that he ruled over the entire underworld, was commanded to unleash her wrath upon the lightning. Upon saying this, he releases a surge of force directed straight at. Naming felt a jolt of shock when he realized that his mantle was not electricity as he had expected, but lightning itself. Using the force from his previous movement, Ivan delivers a direct blow to Yammer's stomach, silently demanding to know Yammer's current thoughts about the situation. Every part of his body seemed to be consumed by an intense, fiery sensation. Even the strongest person would struggle to withstand a direct hit from lightning. Feels a sense of surprise upon realizing that his mantle, too, has been affected. It turned out to be real lightning, yet he found the situation amusing and laughed directly at Ivan, since the revelation actually simplified matters for him. Ivan stared in disbelief, realizing that he had emerged completely unscathed. Naming regretted having to confront, knowing that his lightning abilities were useless against him. Even though Naming was currently at his weakest, he was confident that Ivan would still be powerless to stop him. Ivan reached his breaking point and began launching a relentless series of attacks. Yammer savors the feeling of his muscles, relaxing with each step he takes through the onslaught. Yomer explained to Ivan that he had adjusted himself to handle lightning, believing Ivan deserved to know the reason. His previous boss had a cruel and violent nature, and after enduring countless beatings, he became numb to the abuse. He doubted that words would be enough to make him understand, so he decided to demonstrate instead. He requested that the Jade Emperor use his most powerful attack against him. Nothing occurs in response to the action taken against him. Refers to him as a forgetful and aged man. As a result, furious streaks of lightning begin to pour down upon him from the sky. At the mall, completed organizing several items and informed, who was present as well. Nearly all preparations had been completed. BQ expressed her gratitude, acknowledging that their work had been completed much more quickly because of the help she received. Brushed off the situation, insisting it was no trouble at all. She believed she was the one who owed thanks, since she hadn't anticipated the other's arrival to be so prompt. Because of the group's hard work, all the civilians were able to escape without harm. Wondered aloud whether was currently battling the deceased opponent, and nodded in agreement, confirming suspicion. Both of them traveled down to the underworld so he could confront his rival there. BQ could only picture what that realm must look like now. She then inquired whether she had located the pig named A. Confirmed that they had, but still felt uneasy. She had encountered her on several occasions before. Despite suggestion that consider a different job, continued to ignore the advice. She appeared to have loved ones depending on her. Ju paused, reflecting on the word, and recalling the actions Cannonball had taken against her. Her face suddenly grew somber, as she insisted that what possessed could not be considered a real family. She mistakenly thinks that those cruel individuals are her relatives. Despite the circumstances, there was a sense of reassurance, for his presence meant that no wrongdoer would be allowed to slip away. As an Avon's battle raged on, Cannonball stood in shock, struggling to process the scene unfolding before him. He also considered himself fortunate that the dead man had tossed him out of the way. Had he not moved when he did, he likely would have been trapped in the attack and lost his life. He summoned who stood frozen in disbelief, barely able to move or react. He seized her arm, insisting that she reveal their location. He expected her to disclose all the information she possessed. Addressed him solely as father, a choice of words that reignited his anger. He had made it clear that being addressed as father by someone he considered beneath him was unacceptable, and he wondered how much longer they would have to keep up the charade of being a family. He felt a strong dislike towards her, and often struggled to comprehend her words due to her frequent stuttering. She wondered if she should respond to the question or risk facing the same consequences as the director. The people chasing them had roots in her past, linked to her life. He wondered why he had been pulled into this mess, too. Blame rested on her shoulders. She realized she needed to help him escape right away before he lost his patience. Tears ran down his cheeks as she continued to address him as her father, but Cannonball firmly instructed her to cease. She had never been his daughter, not even for a moment. The force of the Jade Emperor's attack was so overwhelming that it caused Fink to react immediately. Had already dealt with the sinner. He shifted his focus to Cannonball, reflecting on how he had never been able to make sense of Cannonball's choices through reason alone. She continued to bear everything, though the reason for her perseverance remained unclear. Cannonball positioned himself behind her, issuing a chilling warning that he would break her neck should he move any closer. Turns to the pig, curious about her actions. Cannonball initially assumes the conversation is directed at him, but quickly realizes that's not the case. Instead, the speaker is actually addressing her. She belonged to the group known as the 12 Zodiac Signs, yet she endured unfair treatment from the overweight man without protest. Acknowledged his presence with a hesitant nod, carefully keeping his gaze averted, and remarked that quite some time had passed since their previous encounter. Wondered aloud about everything that had taken place during the time she had been away. Assistance from her would have been greatly appreciated at this moment. She remained silent, prompting to consider another way to protect himself. He informed of his intention to bargain, proposing to surrender the worthless object in exchange for safe passage out of the area. She always followed his instructions without question, so he planned to simply tell her to accompany him. Yammer simply needed to stay away from him, which would benefit them both. Without warning, Ivan jolted out of his daze, his eyes narrowing as he observed the scene before him. Disbelief colored his expression as he noted that he had never encountered such blatant arrogance. Words tumbled carelessly from his open mouth, each one spoken without a hint of concern for what might follow. Against all odds, a simple human claimed he would be the one to silence those insolent words, insisting that the Zodiac was Salone, not meant for anyone else. Cannonball brazenly declared that the girl belonged to him alone, insisting she was nothing more than a tool for his own schemes, and not for anyone else to claim. Ivan regarded him with disdain, thinking of him as a fool who assumed the world would bend to his wishes, despite having no understanding of his current situation. as the argument between the two escalated in volume, was left shaking and in tears. Without warning, No Ming broke into the heated argument, turning to Ivan with surprise and questioning whether he had actually mentioned. He cautions him against uttering that name so carelessly, making it clear that any disrespect would lead to harsh consequences. His presence grew more intense as he pressed for confirmation that was truly the one who had sent Ivan. Ivan, bewildered, struggled to comprehend the situation, questioning how someone he thought was merely a pet could act this way. Yomer intervened before he could release a torrent of hellfire on, urging him to remember the single most crucial rule that guided every mission. Realizes the importance of directing his attention toward the victim. He expresses regret for acting so abruptly. Yama crouched down and motioned for Cannonball to move back, indicating that he needed a private moment to talk too. Cannonball insists that he will remain exactly where he is until grants him permission to go. Grabs hold of him firmly and warns that another word will lead to his tongue being torn out. They wanted to suspend him by his feet and string his decaying intestines through the corridors of the underworld as gruesome decorations. Cannonball became so frightened by the news that he wet himself, and showing no concern, carelessly threw him to the side. He moves nearer to Daha, wanting to understand her reasons for desiring a family. She stated that such a thing could never exist in hell, and watching humans find joy from it made her feel jealous. She once believed that having a family would bring her happiness, but now she realized just how naive that hope had been. She had resolved that she would never see anyone as family again, regardless of the circumstances. Softly uttered her name, expressing his hope that she would choose to be reborn alongside him as part of the same family. Wondered aloud whether the statement was actually true, and assured him that it was. By staying connected like this, and entering their next lives side by side, they would finally share the bond of a real family. It seemed far more appealing than the person she had become. Sobs grew more intense as she listened, her voice trembling with uncertainty as she wondered aloud whether such a thing could truly be acceptable. Yammer agreed that it certainly would, but insisted that a promise must be made to keep it secret for all time. He rose to his feet and reached out his hand toward her, while she gave her own promise in return. Afterward, she embraced him tightly, her heart filled with gratitude for his actions. Wrapped her arms around the girl's back, expressing that, from this moment forward, they would depend on one another. Without warning, a red light started to shine from, and at the same moment, his heart radiated with the same glow as she transformed into a new shape. Had never anticipated that she would allow herself to be so vulnerable with him. Her fate, previously entwined with, was now shifting, forging a new connection with. Ivan is left with no choice but to silently observe the events unfolding before him. Cannonball slowly made his way over, crawling up to the man's leg, and told him that he must be in need of. He was willing to surrender her too, but only if helped him escape from the situation. Ivan stands poised, prepared to smash his opponent's head without a moment's hesitation. Naming urges him to be patient, assuring that will soon determine what will happen to him. The dark fire engulfing had grown even more powerful, and he had noticed the change. At last, the memory of warning resurfaced in their mind. The zodiacs had to be gathered before Yammer could reclaim his strength. However, it appeared that he had not succeeded in completing the one responsibility entrusted to him. After the connection formed successfully, stepped forward in an elegant red dress, having taken on the role of King's direct subordinate. Now he finally grasped the reason behind Sphere, as Yomer's growing power became unmistakably clear to him. Caught in a desperate situation, he realizes that taking action is his only option. Summoning every bit of strength left, the character prepares for a final attack, convinced that this will be the end for both of them. He lunges forward with remarkable swiftness, yet Noman dismisses his effort by labeling him as foolish. The individual failed to grasp the real significance of serving under someone else's authority, and became linked by destiny, and she gained access to some of his godly powers. In exchange, received a force of immense strength. Activating a mantle brought such overwhelming power that anyone witnessing it might wish they had never existed. The real power hidden within the mantle was known as a field that consumed everything in its path. At last, realizes the true identity of the opponent he has been battling all along. He realizes the real identity of. He finally understood the reason would never risk speaking his name with disrespect. He was now certain that an endless torment awaited her in hell. Once the ability takes control over Ivan, Yammer let go of the object and signaled that it was time to begin the gnoming process. Without hesitation, the character lowers their head in a respectful bow before him. He informed Naming that the person he had just consumed had served under. He planned to inflict some pain on the man before finally sending him to hell. Although he carried out his task, he needed to uncover any details he could about that scoundrel. Appeared to be quietly scheming, his actions hinting at an unforeseen plan unfolding. Ming confidently assured everyone that the task would be handled, since taking care of such matters was what he excelled at. Yammer walked up to Cannonball, expressing regret for having kept him waiting such a long time, and informed him that it was finally his moment to face judgment. He was expected to behave himself and remain silent. He clutched his head in distress and instantly began to scream, insisting that he needed to talk to. He simply longs for a single opportunity to speak with her. Pushed him ahead of her, making sure he stood as a barrier in front. He quickly drops to his knees and starts offering earnest apologies at her feet. He had treated her unkindly for far too long, and he sensed that if this continued, something terrible was bound to occur. He falls to his knees, desperately promising that he will never raise his hand against her or utter another harsh word. With every ounce of his strength, he implores her to let him live, his voice trembling with fear and regret. Wondered aloud about the other girl's plans, curious about what she hoped to do next. Chooses to let go of her resentment, realizing that despite his harsh behavior, he had always looked after her. Cannonball wonders aloud whether she would truly go that far to help him. She nodded in agreement, signaling that she had let go of her anger and forgiven him. Cannonball approached his feet, expressing hope that her forgiveness meant he would now be released. His piercing stare leaves no doubt about the fate awaiting the overweight man. He grabs hold of the other person, insisting that he just can't comprehend the situation. Although he had been forgiven, he felt a surge of happiness. Cannonball believed that forgiveness led to a lighter consequence. Yammer points out that even though the victim has forgiven him, the hurt he caused will not simply vanish. The wrongdoings he carried out would be etched in the victim's memory for a lifetime. Forgiveness, if it wiped away all wrongdoing, would allow him to keep taking advantage of those with less power, knowing they would always pardon his actions. Despite his lack of human qualities and incomplete understanding of them, he remained unwavering in his resolve to see that every wrongdoing received its due punishment. He forcefully threw his opponent to the ground, declaring in a cold voice that the Punisher always remembered those who sinned. He was about to announce his verdict, fully aware that the accused was known for a biting wit. His body frequently inflicted wounds as sharp as a blade, and he would continue ascending the mountain of form until that blade had been entirely dulled. They managed to do it without relying on their arms or legs. Following that, his insides would be completely shredded and put on display as a gruesome ornament. The thought lingered, a harsh farewell for the one known as Cannonball. In just a matter of minutes, no one would remember them anymore. Finally re-emerged in the real world, finding himself in Wu. The person who had been waiting patiently for him observed that his arrival had taken more time than anticipated. He confirmed what he had done, then inquired whether things had gone smoothly with. Yum, looking tired, explained that the issue had been taken care of. Narrowed his eyes at him, curiosity etched across his face, silently inquiring about the matter. In response, he clarified that delivering such judgments often had this effect on him. Eventually, his strength fades, leaving him unable to go on. Reached into her bag and handed him a fish-shaped pastry she had purchased earlier, wanting to know if he liked the taste. Yammer wants to know the origin of the item she has. As they exited the mall, she pointed out that a store was located just up ahead. Because had allowed her a little more time, she managed to purchase the food for him, knowing he would likely be hungry. observed her skipping down the sidewalk and remarked that he had put in a lot of effort that day, suggesting it was time for them to finish up and go home. After finishing his pastry, joined the others by hopping down the sidewalk, a smile spreading across his face as he enjoyed how simple and pleasant human life could be. Inside's office, her assistant reported that signs of the dead had been found in 5 different areas. Throughout the nation, realizes that these particular places are believed to be the hiding spots of the 12 zodiacs. It was clear that the situation was not accidental, yet she also felt a growing curiosity about the details had shared concerning the event that took place at the mall. The assistant admits that not all the details are, but his research indicates that the deceased individual worked under. Furthermore, it appears that is assembling the 12 zodiacs for an unknown purpose. Questioned his own actions, feeling confused because these were once his subordinates, and he believed they ought to follow his commands without hesitation. Rather than relying on persuasion, he chooses to use physical strength. The increase in unrest among the dead had coincided with Yelmer's arrival, making the timing seem significant. Seemed to sense his presence as soon as he arrived and began assembling the zodiacs, likely plotting something. Without warning, bright points of light flared up in the night sky, resembling stars and leaving bewildered. Eventually, she comes to realize what it means. She explained that Bastard had acted in that manner on purpose, fully aware that his actions would draw attention and discourage anyone from pursuing him after such an error. She hastily jots down a message on a sheet of paper and instructs that it be delivered to without delay. He grasps her point, yet without warning, she shoves him forcefully against the wall. She informs him that there is yet another crucial task she needs him to undertake. She leaned in close and murmured softly into his ear. Dark silhouettes crept forward at a cautious pace. She forcefully pushes him once more, emphasizing that the mission holds utmost significance and that his survival is directly tied to its success. She shoved the young man aside, insisting that this moment was their sole opportunity. The other man fixed his gaze on her, making it clear through his expression that she already understood the purpose of their visit, and silently urged her to get ready to go. Had called everyone together, gathering them in one place. Meanwhile, did everything he could to stall for more time. Someone wondered about the reason behind sudden and intense effort to assemble the zodiac. She struggled to grasp his intentions, puzzled by his actions, especially since he had never behaved like the rest of them in the past. Uninterested in exchanging pleasantries, reaches for the hilt of his sword, signaling his readiness for action. BQ is struck 3 times in quick succession, causing her to collapse to the ground without delay. He commanded his underlings to seize her, leaving the assistant standing by helplessly, uncertain of how to react in that moment. Spots what is happening and keeps a close eye on it, which puts the other person at a disadvantage. The character speculates about the possibility of rats living in the building. The assistant immediately dashed away, prompting one of subordinates to wonder aloud whether they ought to give chase. He explains that conserving energy is important and instructs one of the deceased to create a portal, as their next target is the remaining zodiacs. After the task was completed, and as the crowd started to move through, a lifeless figure resembling a monk wondered aloud if he could quietly leave for a short time. The red-haired corpse observed his own actions, noting with a hint of irony that he was repeating the same behavior as before. He wondered to himself if causing humans pain truly brought him that much satisfaction. The heretic monk remarks that the comment is severe and unrelated to him, yet Wu agrees as long as a single condition is met. He knew that if he ever came across, he shouldn't even consider engaging in a fight. The man with red hair, though no longer among the living, tells him to reach out if he ever discovers something entertaining to pass the time. The heretic monk offered a smile, his expression suggesting that he saw no reason not to do so. The following morning, and burst through a door at dawn, their entrance marked by the loud thud of a forceful kick. It seemed they had suddenly been called away to handle a case. Expresses regret for the situation, while simply questions the reason behind their early departure. Revealed that the Undertaker's main base had come under assault from the dead, many of whom were wrapped in shrouds, forcing authorities to lock down the whole area surrounding headquarters. A nearby taxi driver gestures for them to approach, and as soon as they climb inside, he quickly pulls away from the curb. Requested that he bring them as near as possible to the restricted area. She made sure to cover as much space as she could while assisting Yammer in fastening his. He questioned how their group, known for hunting the dead, could have fallen victim to an attack with such little resistance. Let out a deep sigh and began to clarify that the situation was more complex than it appeared. He was supposed to recall his initial discussion with. Remembers her remark about how humans face difficulties defending themselves, being far more vulnerable than the undead. Wondered if that was everything. He recalled how, 21 years earlier, the dead had unexpectedly returned, prompting the creation of the Undertaker Association. Since then, its members had been regarded much like government officials. She begins to elaborate, but then realizes he's watching her with a clueless expression, clearly recalling No Ming's earlier words. She decided that, since he appeared clueless, she would need to clarify things for him as patiently as if she were speaking to a young child. After spending a moment deep in thought, she manages to find a convincing reason. The Undertakers served as guardians against the dangers posed by the dead, acting much like law enforcement officers. The government compensated them for safeguarding the living from these threats. Typically, an experienced Undertaker could manage 3 corpses simultaneously, though that standard only held true for ordinary deaths. Individuals burdened by greater transgressions, and who have endured the torments of hell for extended periods, cannot be easily overcome without the use of shrouds. The hierarchy of strength became clear. The dead were more powerful than ordinary humans, yet humans who wore shrouds surpassed them. However, when the dead possessed shrouds as well, they became the mightiest of all. Although this was common knowledge, it was important to remember that those who wore shrouds after death were referred to as. Yammer feels content with the answer, but realizes it's time to get going now that they've reached headquarters. All they discover is a scene filled with dust and scattered debris. Reassures her, explaining that it doesn't matter if the beings are ordinary dead, or, as long as they manage to capture them, everything will turn out all right. Naming emerged abruptly after enduring another grueling daily ordeal, reflecting to himself that the situation might be more complicated than he had anticipated. Jun saw the blood smeared across his own face and, concerned, wondered aloud if he had been hurt. Naming quickly reassured him, explaining that the blood did not belong to Jun. Wondered if he had been able to obtain any information from Avon. Naming responded by explaining that he had attempted to coax all the information from him, in a gentle manner. In the final moments, Ivan pleaded desperately for his life, realizing he had no other option left. He realized that his understanding was limited, but he did have one crucial piece of information. A few of his subordinates were currently spending time in. Considered this a positive development, believing it could help persuade them to support their mission. However, when she notices the look on his face, she immediately stops talking. He wondered aloud about their numbers, but Naming could only shrug, admitting he had no idea since Ivan had been of little help. Yomer let out a deep sigh, remarking that challenges would only become tougher from this point forward, especially for Al. He silently wishes that, if nothing else, the person isn't or. If it turned out to be either of those two, the circumstances would become much more dire. A lifeless figure lurked in the shadows behind a stone slab, poised to strike as he watched his unsuspecting victims, his anticipation clear as he waited for fresh prey. Instructed to reach out to headquarters and inform them that backup had been dispatched and would be arriving shortly. From that point to where they were, they would choose the quickest path, destroying every undead creature they met along the way. On OBBC News, a reporter announces that individuals undergoing psychiatric treatment for depression. A large group was observed departing from the hospital simultaneously. This unusual occurrence, happening across the country, sparked widespread debate and controversy. Most of the patients shared the same zodiac sign, having been born in the year of the pig. At that moment, Professor Tong was about to address them. He acknowledges viewing this event as the start of a new trend in society. According to the year someone is born, the zodiac assigns them one of 12 animal spirits, including creatures like the rat, the ox, and the pig. The sequence begins with the rat and ends with the pig. Anyone born during the year assigned to the rat is considered a rat according to the tradition. During the year of the rooster, a person born under that sign would be called a rooster as well. While this idea was often dismissed as just a folk legend, lately the world had begun to witness strange and unexplained events happening all around. Those who entered the world during the year of the pig had been battling feelings of deep sadness, while individuals born in the year of the sheep found themselves turning more devotedly toward their faith. At the same time, criminal activity had noticeably increased. Murders were particularly common among individuals born in the year of the snake. They kept investigating, convinced that a mysterious force was influencing the community. The reporter expressed gratitude for his insights before wrapping up the conversation. The broadcast shifted to a different topic. The previous evening, an assault by the undead targeted the Undertaker Association, leading to several injuries and fatalities. The station then prepared to connect live with Park, a reporter currently at the scene. He points out that despite the late hour, the dead continue to wreak havoc. The Undertakers, armed with their shrouds, worked tirelessly to keep the dangers under control. Yet, in an unsettling twist, the deceased continued to behave in unexpected ways. The group appeared to be working together in a coordinated way, with present in large numbers, which made it hard to bring them under control. He found himself confined within a makeshift shelter, surrounded by others whose anxious eyes flickered toward the entrance as they all silently hoped for help to arrive. The threat of the dead breaking through the fragile barricade loomed over them, promising disaster and leaving them uncertain if any of them would survive. Fate proved him right as the barrier shattered, allowing the dead to flood inside with the monk leading them. He starts to recite Buddhist prayers, warning everyone that a massacre is destined to occur in this place. The eyes reflected a deep sadness, capturing the profound sorrow that weighed upon the living. He questions whether someone is being concealed in the area, but his words leave everyone confused about his intentions. The Buddhist allows the departed to follow their own paths without interference. The Undertakers had no choice but to trigger the activation of their shrouds. The leader instructed the group to carry the injured away, while the remaining members prepared to defend their position. Everyone relied on their unique powers to fight off the approaching undead, yet despite their efforts, the threat persisted. It was evident that, despite managing to save a few survivors and take down many of the undead, they were steadily losing control of the situation. The leader becomes aware of the increasing pressure closing in on them, feeling confusion and helplessness as they struggle to find a solution. Without warning, a glimmer of optimism flickered through the group when one of the men announced that help had finally come. The leader's face lights up with happiness upon receiving the news, and they eagerly inquire about the exact number. The man responds by stating that there are just 2. The leader assumes he was referring to 200, believing that amount would suffice. He guessed the man might be around 20, judging by the look on his face. That option would be considered suitable as well. As hopelessness washes over the man's features, the leader responds. Peter comes to the startling conclusion that with only 2 people arriving, their situation is hopeless. The monk emerged quietly behind him, lamenting that they were living through troubled days when even the gods seemed to have turned their backs on humanity. The leader immediately sensed, from a single glance, that the powerful corpse before him was far beyond his own abilities to confront. In that moment, he realized his fate depended entirely on the will of this formidable being. The monk observed that all things emerge from emptiness and eventually fade back into oblivion. Life, he thought, was both short and full of suffering. He wondered if dying without finding meaning would be nothing but a waste. The leader remained silent, prompting the monk to urge him to relax, assuring that his intentions were purely to have a conversation. He wondered if capture was already known to him. The leader questioned their motives, but the monk dismissed the concern, insisting that it was irrelevant at this point. The night before, as they arrived to take her away, she unexpectedly started rambling about irrelevant memories and outdated tales. sharing stories that seemed completely out of place in that moment. Rumors circulated that she had previously served as an advisor too. Despite her sharp intellect, her constant chatter had no real purpose. Instead, she used her words as a tactic to stall for more time. A small, peculiar human managed to slip away, raising suspicions that something unusual had occurred. They scoured every corner in their search, but the individual remained elusive and unfound. He appeared to be concealed somewhere nearby. The leader urges him to speak directly, prompting the monk to respond with a gentle smile. He gestures toward the area where the children, injured, and elderly are gathered, convinced that the individual they seek must be within that group. He insisted on searching, promising that if he failed to find the person they were looking for, he would not create any more problems and would send all the spirits back where they belonged. To further earn their confidence, the deceased man reveals that he used to be a monk and still remembers the real importance of life. He makes a vow to avoid causing harm to others. All that was required was for them to surrender the individual concealed within. The moment arrived for a decision. Allowing him entry was one option, while the other meant preparing for a hopeless battle. The leader surveyed the scene, his eyes taking in the injured lying nearby and the weary undertakers standing close by. His assistant stands in a shadowy corner, struggling to comprehend how the spirits of the dead managed to trail him to this place. Their determination was unwavering. It appeared they would continue searching relentlessly, and with no escape routes remaining, he realized a choice had to be made. He knew he couldn't risk the safety of everyone else for his own sake, yet he remembered how had given him this important task to complete. Should he fall into their hands, everything she gave up would be for nothing. As he drifted into his own thoughts, gently placed a hand on his shoulder, offering reassurance and encouraging him to let go of his worries. The leader feels overwhelmed by the impossible decision forced upon him. His sense of right and wrong is challenged, leaving him unable to justify his actions. Without warning, a different undertaker arrived and warned him against paying attention to the first man's words. The newcomer insisted that, despite the other's claims of valuing life, everything about him was tainted with the stench of blood. He needed to remain steadfast in his beliefs, aware that the other man took pleasure in the unfolding events. The monk pauses, his gaze lingering briefly before he unveils who he truly is. He would also depart empty-handed, carrying only the fleeting pain that awaited them. The undertaker steels himself, fully expecting his life to end, yet something unexpected happens. Black flames lashed against the monk's hand, and in that instant he realized exactly who commanded such fire. Only a single individual possesses the power to control flames that consume all that stands before them. King stood before him, granting him the honor of a personal audience. In the days when he ruled the underworld, he counted among his 12 followers a rebellious monk named. In his days as a human, he ventured into the lair of a tiger that had seized and tormented a young monk. Overwhelmed by fury at the scene before him, he ripped the tigers into tiny fragments and abandoned their remains to decay. He gained fame as a legend, known far and wide for his extraordinary fighting abilities. No Ming regarded him with revulsion, unable to fathom that someone who had forsaken every monk's principle would side with. Wondered aloud about his presence, while observed that had matured impressively since their previous encounter. He appeared to be making the most of his retirement, clearly finding happiness in his new way of life. Yomer remained silent, refusing to respond, prompting to remark that Yomer appears sharp now. He questioned how he had arrived in this realm, and sensed that his arrival marked the beginning of something significant. His irritation grew in response to the teasing, yet quickly assured him that it was all in good fun and that he was simply glad to be reunited with him. He thought a light-hearted comment would fit the moment, yet he was genuinely surprised to discover that had taken on a new assistant. They imagined the challenges endured alongside her had to have been immense. No one seemed bothered by the way this man spoke so freely around Yomer. In fact, no one minded it at all. Responds by explaining that their current status as adversaries makes such feelings expected. Despite everything, his curiosity would not let him stay silent. He wondered why couldn't simply release him and pretend he had never been present. Yammer warns that he must not even consider it, threatening to rip him to pieces and cast him into the depths of hell. He was determined to reveal every secret he held, willing to spend as much time as necessary to do so. Newu felt satisfied to find that Ra hadn't changed at all, yet he also made it clear through his actions that he intended to be the one to defeat him. Considered him out of his mind, unable to believe that he truly thought he could stand a chance against now. Nu remembered his own words, a phrase he frequently shared with those younger than him. The only way to find out is to give it a try. At that moment, he drew in a deep breath and unleashed a powerful shout, making sure his voice carried far enough for every to hear him. The powerful ruler of the underworld emerged, intent on taking what belonged to them. With each passing moment, his strength continued to increase. Should they permit it, he would rise to become a challenge that Toolbox could never overcome. At this point, when he was most vulnerable, it was the perfect opportunity to attack and finish him off. Taking his life would mark the start of the campaign to conquer. The moment his staff strikes the ground with force. As countless materialized in the area surrounding him, Wu informed Yanra that his death in the upcoming fight would have consequences. He wishes that, if nothing else, he might find new life in a place of eternal happiness.